I never saw the end of this tragedy. I regained consciousness when cold water splashed in my face. I didn't open my eyes right away. I remember being struck by the silence. No rumble of battle, no deafening howl of shells, no roar of engines. And in this silence, as if from afar, I suddenly heard a nightingale singing. It was getting closer, growing, and now it had already taken over everything. And I felt myself again in that distant June night, and together with the nightingales I heard a formidable and imperious salam. I shouted, and I didn't recognize my own voice, hoarse, deaf. Quiet, friend, Yuzi, said someone in front of my face. The alarm was over. I peeped my eyes, I lifted myself up, and I see there are people in tattered uniforms and stripes lying around, and behind them, grey-green figures with automatic rifles. And I realized at once, we are in captivity. Who has not experienced it himself, it is difficult to understand the state of a man who found himself in such a position. It was more terrible than death. And the nightingales continued to rage. It was as if they tried to outshout each other in their bird competition. And again I remembered the June night of the 41st year. The nightingales sang just like that. That was the beginning, and now, is it really the end? I involuntarily said these words aloud. Sailor Pasha Danchuk, who was nearby, heard me and said, "Wait, petty officer, it's never too late to die." I have a noise in my head. I clench my temples with my hands. Pasha moves towards me. "No. Does it hurt a lot, comrade petty officer?" "It'll pass. You better tell me what happened." "I'll tell you everything. But I'm asking you in advance. Keep your temper. We agreed to be together and at the first opportunity to run to the mountains to the partisans. Then everyone will hear about the Zeleznykovity." Pasha speaks in a low voice. The sailors crawl closer to hear him. It turns out that it was he who saved me from death. The fascists were shooting commanders on the spot, but Pasha unnoticeably for them took off my flannel with petty officer's patches and put on a soldier's uniform. At first I was even displeased with him, but then agreed. We will always have time to die. From his story I learned that most of the guys who came with me out of the tunnel died. The survivors returned to the tunnel, but there was already shooting. The Germans had entered from the opposite side. The fight didn't last long. Those who were not killed were captured alive by the Nazis and their hired policemen. The wounded commissar crawled with difficulty to the stack with explosives. He had already struck a match to light the cord, but he was immediately shot. The regimental commissar Pyotr Agafonovich Porozov remained a true Bolshevik until his last breath. Brave, That is why our Leninist party is invincible, that such people make up its backbone. To the shore of the Black River, small groups of people were driven to the shore of the Black River. There were 200 of us. People dressed each other's wounds, drank, filled flasks with water. But then the Germans started running. We heard commands, swearing, barking of guard dogs. We were lifted up, organized in a column and led. On the right and on the left, machine gunners with sheepdogs on the lead. We came out on a hillside. Sevastopol came into view, all in smoking ruins. The sailors are slowing down. We say goodbye to our native city. Remember, guys, for the rest of your lives. I didn't finish. A policeman ran up and slapped me on the back with a lash. Don't delay. March, march. We came to the Simferopol highway, but immediately turned off it. From the front rows, Germans and police kicked out some people, gave them shovels and forced them to deepen the bomb craters. We realized here are our graves. We hugged each other. Well, not for the first time to look death in the eyes. There's a Red Army soldier ahead of me, healthy, strong, a real hero. He turns to me, anger and surprise in his eyes. What is this? They have no right without a trial. We're prisoners. Beasts of animal law. They can't be reasoned with. Let's get acquainted and die as friends. And mine is Peter. Give me your hand. The fascists are waiting for something. They want to torture us. They're waiting for us to fall to our knees. They won't, you bastards. A Red Fleet soldier to my side rolled a cigar and smoked. The cigarette flared up, crackling. Probably the mahorka in the sailor's pocket was mixed with gunpowder. The sailor turned to me. His face was familiar. We met on the front line. He was from the 7th Marine Brigade. Give me a cigar once, brother. I ask him. He holds out a cigar. I take 2 sips of the tart smoke and return the cigarette to the sailor. he passes it to another, and it went from fighter to fighter. Time drags on for an excruciatingly long time. Suddenly the guys who were digging the holes threw their shovels at the convoy and rushed to the sides. But this attempt was too desperate. All of them were overtaken by bullets of fascist machine guns. Then the machine guns were pointed at us. Jets of lead struck the crowd of prisoners. Ahead of me people were falling. Who shouted, "Lie down, petty officer." And he grabbed me and threw me down on the ground. And when the shooting ended, I saw that my comrade was dead. Falling, he covered me with his body, but he himself was killed. Apparently, I was destined for other trials. All the survivors are standing shoulder to shoulder again, and the Germans fidgeted, stretched out in a string. A black car approached. An officer ran up to it, opened the door obligingly. The general came out, listened to the officer's report, looked indifferently at the prisoners, said something to the interpreter. The latter turned to the crowd. "Although you all deserve a cruel death, the German command gives you life." General got into the car and left, and we began to be sorted. The healthy were ordered to move to the right, the wounded to the left. Everyone who could move was on the right side. Nobody went to the left. About 50 dead, and seriously wounded remained lying on the place. The Nazis went around the crowd and forcibly pulled out those who could hardly stand on their feet. Among my friends, they took away the commander Sasha Toporkov, who was shot in the stomach. No matter how we hit him, the interpreter noticed and gave him away. Sasha smiled bitterly and left the ranks. He only had enough strength for a few steps. He fell on his back. Here he was shot. I took the hands of Mitya Kolote and Pasha Dunchel. We must survive to pay for everything. Yes, we must survive. Against all odds, rage against our enemies, thirst for revenge. That's what we live by now. Hitler died out on the road behind us. The shots did not cease. Hitlerites were killing the wounded. Another column of prisoners caught up with us. Hundreds of exhausted, disparate people. We merge into this mournful stream, dissolve in it. My friends support me under my arms. I am very weak, and drag me away from the last rows. Convoys are hurrying, pushing us along. Who lacks strength, who lags behind, he forever remains in the steppe with a shot head. In the evening near Bakhai-Sarai, they ordered to lie down on the ground. They warned whoever raises his head would be shot. I will not describe all the details of fascist captivity. Much has already been written about it. Everywhere was the same: abuse of human dignity, torture, hunger and death, death at every step, at any hour of the day and night. Many could not stand it. They went down. But the majority, even in captivity, remained Soviet citizens. And I and my comrades lived with the thought of escape. In Simferopol I made the first attempt. A large group of prisoners were forced to dig graves for dead Germans. I was allowed to rest for a few minutes. I lay down under a bush and saw a ditch overgrown with weeds. Instantly a plan was formed. I crawled deeper and covered myself with fallen leaves. The convoy did not notice my disappearance. During the day they had shot several prisoners and apparently lost count. At night I came out of my hiding place. But I didn't go far. The police tracked me down. I never realized that man is so tenacious. I was kicked, trampled. There was no healthy place left on my body. And yet I survived. Luckily for me, the policeman brought me not to the German, but to a nearby Romanian unit. Romanians rarely shot prisoners, leaving it to the Nazis. After keeping me for 3 days and even having treated me a little, they handed me over to the German commandant's office. Here the conversation was short. They squeezed me into a cellar, packed with people, and then drove me to Kurt. Much has been written about fascist atrocities near this city, but I cannot keep silent about it. It was at night. We were put into covered cars and taken to the steppe. They lined us up along an anti-tank ditch. They ordered us all to undress. We stood there, illuminated by car headlights, children crying, crawling on their knees. Mothers were holding their children out to the executioners, begging to keep them alive. The fascists responded by whipping both women and children with whips. Near me is a young woman with a 6-year-old blonde boy. She is sobbing, begging to spare her son. The Hitlerite raised his pistol and shot the woman in the head. She fell, not letting go of her son's hands. It's raining. People are shivering from cold and fear. And then dozens of machine guns struck the crowd pressed against the edge of the ditch, drowning out the heartbreaking cries, sobs, and curses. I didn't wait for a bullet. I leaned back and rolled into the ditch. The bodies of men piled on top of me. I can feel the hot blood pouring out. I can't breathe. An increasing weight weighs down on me. Then the crackle of machine guns stops and resumes again, but louder. It seems that the fascists are shooting directly into the ditch to guarantee it. Well, I think now they will fill the moat and the end. But Hitlerites, apparently, did not want to get wet in the pouring rain. The engines of the trucks roared and there was silence, broken only by the wheezing and faint groans of the dying. A stream ran through the bottom, probably accumulated rainwater. But after washing hundreds of corpses, it has become warm and saturated with blood. I feel like it's a river of blood. I think I'm going to drown in it. The horror of it makes my mind go blank. I can't move an arm or a leg under the weight of the bodies. I'm struggling as hard as I can, not to suffocate, sometimes losing consciousness. I pull apart corpses that have not yet cooled down. I finally got out, breathed. It's still raining. I'm in my underwear, but my body is burning. The lightning is shining. In their flashes, the ditch looks even more terrible, covered with naked human bodies frozen in the most unnatural poses. In the light of another lightning bolt, I notice piles of rags left by the policemen in the open air. I crawl from one pile to another, choosing something for myself. I found a shirt and some torn pants. Under a tree, I noticed a funnel filled with rainwater. I climb into it to wash off the blood. I pulled on my wet clothes. Now I'm shivering with chills. My teeth are chattering. I look around. Where to now? I won't go to the mountains anymore. The police will catch me again. I'll try to sneak into the city. True, I don't know anyone in Kerch, but the world is not without kind people, and maybe they'll take me in. For a long time I wander along the muddy road. Here is the outskirts of the city. I press against the walls of houses and walk along the deserted street, if only not to run into a patrol. It's quiet, not even a dog barking. Only occasionally a shot or a machine gun line will roll, and in the captured city Hitlerites do not feel safe. I walk from house to house, empty, all ruined and broken, and already dawn is soon. I decide to crawl into the first hovel I find. I'll hide, rest, and then we'll see what to do. I creep to the hut, lost on the outskirts, slowly pushing on the... It won't budge. Suddenly I hear a senile cough. I run down from the porch, waiting in the side. A tall old man in a long shirt, barefoot with dishevelled hair, came out. I call him quietly, "Father?" The old man flinched. He looked at me. I waited with my head down. Is he going to chase me away? No. He points to the porch and walks ahead. It's half dark in the hut. I recognize a bench along the wall, a table, a large Russian stove. A shaggy head hangs down from the stove. "Grandfather, who have you brought?" "No. Sleep, my daughter, sleep." The master put a dry, calloused hand on my shoulder. He asked me in a whisper, "Were you from there? We heard shooting." I nodded. The girl from the stove is sneaking glances at me. Her black eyes gleamed with curiosity. "Go to sleep. There's nothing to gawk at." He went out into the hay, rattled something there, grumbling under his nose in an old man's way. He brought a trough and 2 buckets of water. Digging behind the stove, he took out a bar of soap. "Let's get you cleaned up. Are you hurt?" "No." He opened the trunk, took out work pants, smelling slightly gasoline, a dark shirt with a lapel collar, sandals, a cardigan and underpants. "Wash and dress, and yours should be put away." Rolling up the rags, he left. He came back when I had already washed and dressed. The old man took a pair of scissors, trimmed my braids into a circle, trimmed my beard, which had already grown. Then he took out a razor, a mirror, a brush, shave. "And you, Nina, get up. I see you won't sleep anyway. Let's get started." The girl was about 16. She fussed, ran around the room, always looking at me with inquisitive eyes. "We'll cook potatoes, Nina. We'll have breakfast," the old man told her. I had forgotten the last time I had eaten. The thought of food made me dizzy. My hand trembled, and I cut myself. The old man noticed. "H&E, careful. The razor is sharp. My father's razor. You can't find one like it nowadays." When I shaved, I didn't recognize myself. The old man looked at me carefully. He hummed with satisfaction. "Now let's get acquainted. I'm a fisherman. My name is Ivan Nikitich Voronov, and this is Nina, my granddaughter. Her relatives were killed in a bombing raid. A bomb hit their house. Her father was wounded at the front. He was lying in the local hospital. The Nazis shot him on the spot." Nina served boiled potato on the table. "Sit down, my daughter. Let's think together about what to do next." Ivan Nikitich rubbed his wrinkled forehead. "Now I'll tell you what. I have a godson. Once as a boy came to us. I don't know where he is now. Let's assume that it is you. From now on you'll be called Sashko and your last name will be Voronov. Okay. The old man told me a little about his godson's family so that I would know what to say if I was questioned. After breakfast he showed me to the bed. Rest and don't worry about anything. He woke me up at 3 in the afternoon. Get up. Now my friend Lukian will be here. We'll have lunch together. Soon a short old man came. Movable, cheerful, somehow bribingly simple. We sat down at the table. Ivan Nikitich introduced us, told me how I came to their house. Well, what happened there at night? Lukian asked. I briefly described the shooting, the ditch filled with corpses. The old men listened with their heads down. This is the second time, Lukian said. Thousands of people have been killed. It's all right, one day they'll pay for everything. Lukian, Ivan Nikitich began. You're more flexible than I am. We must help Sashka. He has no documents. He can be caught in no time. We'll think of something, Lukian promised. I spent several days with these people. They risked their lives to shelter me, but it did not seem to bother them at all. Grandfather Lukian dropped in occasionally. Once he cautiously hinted that there was an underground organization in the city that was keeping the fascists at bay. From under the lining of his cap, he pulled out a crumpled, oiled notebook. On it was written down a report from the Sovinform Bureau. He read it to us. Now look at the signature. You see, it's underground committee. You see, it means the party is with us. It won't be long now, we'll break the necks of the cats. But I didn't stay with the Voronov family for long. I got into trouble by accident. I wanted to take a look at the life of the city, and there was a raid. Since I had no documents, they took me to the commandant's office. For the Nazis, anyone without papers is a partisan. There were dozens of people like me. Again interrogations, again threats, beatings, hunger, and complete uncertainty. Nobody could say whether you would live till evening. At dawn we were driven out to work in different parts of the city, most often to the port. We were distributed in groups of 10, and each group had 2 escorts, a German and a police. They unloaded bombs. And one evening they put us on cars and took us away. The cars were the same as on that terrible night, trucks with tarpaulin-covered bodies, and they took us the same way. Through a hole in the tarpaulin I saw the Voronov's house. Here was the highway on which I was sneaking into town that night. There's a ditch coming up. Are they taking us to it again? My chest ached. But the cars did not turn to the moat. At breakneck speed they continued on. At last the cars stopped. There were shouts and dogs barking. The senior escort ordered. Go, we're here. We were lined up, counted, and taken to the camp. The fence was solid. At dusk I could see poles 4 meters high, thickly braided with wire. On the outer side of this fence, at each corner of which stood towers with searchlights and machine guns, was a large ditch with an embankment. Inside the fence was a huge barrack, like a collective farm stable. Behind it rose 3 black chimneys of some ruined industrial building. Afterwards we learned that it was a camp cemetery. A strong, penetrating wind blew. Clouds of dust flew up. People covered their faces with their hands. With a creak, the double door of one of the stables opened, and everyone was driven in. The door closed and the lock rattled. My neighbor cursed. Like cattle. There were no huts. The bare dirt floor was covered with piles of garbage. I moved farther away from the door. No sooner had I settled down than I felt something crawling on me, on my hands, on my face, big as a grain of wheat. All night long, almost no one slept a wink. Only in the morning, some of them fell into a heavy sleep. As soon as the pre-morning light began to shine through the gaps in the walls, the gate rattled, without entering the room. Apparently afraid of insects, 2 Germans and 3 policemen with white armbands on their sleeves shout. No, get up, wake up. Now did you sleep? Laughed the big policeman. It's all right, you'll settle in. We have worse bedrooms. Everyone went out into the courtyard and formed up. The commandant announced through an interpreter. You are in a prisoner of war camp. Camp regulations must be strictly observed. Violators are subject to corporal punishment, deprivation of rations, and transfer to the worst dormitories. Those who attempt to carry out communist propaganda to speak against the great German will be executed. Any attempt to escape will be shot. The hostages of the 10 in which the escape worked will also be shot. That was the end of the acquaintance with the superiors. From conversations with other prisoners, I learned that the camp is located between the village of Bajirovo and the village of Samostroy. In 1.5 kilometers from here, some constructions are being built. They are considered strictly secret. Therefore, the prisoners working here are not transferred anywhere. The only way is to the Three Chimneys. There are thousands of our brother buried there. The old-timers said that in a month every one of the 5 campers found rest in the cemetery. The abuse is brutal. The food is starved. They are fed with all kinds of rot, and even this garbage is given such a ration that people turn into skeletons before their eyes. That morning we were sent out to work in a shell pit. We chiseled, cut, carried stone. We worked till dark. By evening people were falling down from exhaustion. When we returned to the camp, we were given a portion of bran meal after standing in line at the kitchen for the liquid mess was poured into tin cans. They just drank it. After the inspection, they were driven back to the stables. Exhausted people fell down, but sleep did not come for a long time. The prisoners talked quietly. They knew nothing about what was going on in the world, and yet they believed in the best. Nothing could kill this faith in a Soviet man, and this faith in the people in their future was poured out in song, for the Germans did not forbid singing. Someone in the darkness quietly, almost in a whisper, draws out his favorite song. Gradually, more and more voices picked up the song, and now it was floating into the night, beyond the walls of the dirty, gloomy barracks. Those were the holiest moments. The song was coming from the depths of the heart, stirring the soul, lamenting the lost happiness, awakening hopes. You, my comrade, remember no evil, familiar words from childhood, but they acquired a special meaning here in the camp. People were singing, exhausted, hungry, torn away from their homeland, but how much love for their native land sounded in their voices. Then everything faded away. Only painful delirium of deadly tired people and moans were heard. Even the strongest people here moan and cry in their sleep. The next day, a new batch of prisoners was brought in. The barrack stable became even more cramped. They put up bunks and began to sleep on 2 floors. And so life went on. The prisoners dug shelters, dugouts, pillboxes and bunkers, built roads, quarried stone, unloaded bombs at Bagherovo station. Brigades of 10-15 people went out to work. Convoys received people against. Immediately it became clear that it was impossible to escape. Germans and policemen watched every step. It was August heat. There were epidemics in the camp. Dysentery and typhus were rampant. The grey camp nag did not have time to take the dead to the Three Chimneys. In a few weeks, about 400 people died. New batches of suicide bombers were arriving to take the place of the dead. Many had one thing on their minds, to escape. But how? Escapes were spontaneous, unorganized, and therefore ended miserably. Almost every evening in front of the prisoner of war formation, executions of the captured escapees were organized. Together with them, 1 or more innocent men from their brigades were shot to intimidate them. The commandant's orders were read, and the executioner Kurt would fire his parabellum into the back of the heads of the kneeling men. But even the executions did not frighten the prisoners. They would do anything to die. I made friends. In the camp there were sailors from Sheleznyakov, Commodore Pavel Danchuk and machine gunner Vladimir Kislenko. We were joined by Sevastopol residents Nikolay and Alexei Dorosheva, Marine Petr Dirk, cavalryman Senior Lieutenant Leonid Maximenko and others, 10 people in total. We tried to get into one brigade. Gradually we won the trust of others by our cohesion. As much as possible help to the weakened and desperate. We persistently tried to establish communication with the outside world. The girls who worked as cleaners in the barracks and pilot's canteen, though cautiously, began to meet with us, reporting the news they had heard on the outside. I remembered a pretty brunette Nina Ivbu, a former teacher, and her friend Luba. They willingly talked with us, agreed to send to Kerch my letter to Ivan Nikitich. The Gestapo tracked them down, and the girls had to pay dearly for their friendship with the prisoners. They were arrested and tortured. Courageous patriots kept silent, did not give us away. Fortunately, they were soon released from the Gestapo, but they were fired from their jobs, and we never saw them again. Still, our ties with the local population were not broken. It was from our friends from the village and from Bagherovo station that we learned about the powerful Soviet offensive on the Volga and Don. The joyful news stirred up the whole camp, strengthened our hopes, although the fascists in the camp these days brutalized as never before, taking out on the defenseless prisoners failures of their army at the front. And I was facing a severe test. One day our brigade, which this time consisted of strangers, was missing 1 man. All of us were beaten up and 3 hostages were taken. I was among them. They put me in solitary confinement, promising to shoot me the next day if the fugitive was not found. You can imagine what I experienced during that 24 hours. The next evening the prisoners were lined up in the courtyard. We were led out of the stone dens. I noticed one of my fellow prisoners had turned grey overnight. The order was read. One of the 3 hostages will be executed today. The choice of victim is left to the executioner. Fat Kurt, the menace of the camp, walks in front of us. His eyes are bloodshot and he reeks of alcohol. He sways. He opens his holster, pulls out a parabellum, pulls the trigger. He lifted my chin with the barrel of the gun, stared into my eyes with an icy, meaningless look, grinned, and walked over to the other one. So he went from victim to victim, enjoying the horror of the doomed. At last he poked his muzzle into the chest of the comrade standing to my right. 2 policemen immediately seized the unfortunate man, twisted his arms back, and threw him on his knees. We heard a loud cry. Farewell, Poltava. Farewell, Pavlik and Alyosha, my sons. Farewell, my wife Nastia. Farewell, father and mother. Farewell, my native land. Farewell, my friends. I ask you for one thing. Take revenge on our enemies. Turning his face to the commandant and his retinue, the doomed man added, and you be damned, you bastards. Our people know how to die. Clenched fists, biting their lips in impotent anger, the prisoners stood in formation. All took off their hats. The executioner slowly raised his gun to the back of his victim's head. In the menacing silence, the shot rang out like thunder. I sank to the ground, unable to move. I'd been holding on for 24 hours, and now I'd given up. I was shaking in nervous trembling. My comrades picked me up, lifted me up. And this time death passed me by, looking only into my eyes with the muzzle of a parabellum. Winter brought us new sufferings. Old-timers said that many years had not been in the Crimea such cold. The frosty wind walked around the camp, and there was no escape from it anywhere. The stables were not heated. Snow was drifting into the cracks. At 8 at night, to keep warm at least a little, we huddled closely together. Half undressed, wearing nothing. People were freezing and dying like flies. That's how we met the new year of 1943. Drunken songs were coming from the commandant's house. And on this New Year's Eve night, we sat stiff and silent and thought whether we would live till the morning. And suddenly anti-aircraft guns barked from all sides. All heard the approaching rumble of airplane engines. And now the bombs were already rumbling on the airfield. We ducked into the slits. From the beams of searchlights, anti-aircraft guns, bomb explosions, it was as bright as daylight. Hours of bombing. Forgetting about the cold, not thinking about the fact that the bombs could hit the barn, we rejoiced like children. Hit harder. Our glorious falcons smash the enemy without mercy. We laughed, joked, braced each other. Thanks to the pilots, their flight was the best gift for us for the new year. Soviet planes began to visit often after that. They knew their job well. The bombs fell only on military objects. Not a single one exploded in the camp. The Germans in the morning said, frightened, Russisch Ivan Ali boom boom, that is, bombed. We laughed in response. Wait, there will be more of that. 20th of January, we were shocked by the news. We caught a fugitive, because of whom I was among the hostages. He was caught at Dyasankoy station in an empty carriage. He was brought half dead from beatings and put in a punishment cell. In the evening we were gathered for the execution, but it did not take place. A frozen corpse was taken out of the punishment cell. They took my comrade to the dead room, and 10 minutes later a sad camp nag took his body to eternal rest to the 3 chimneys. Everyone was bitter and pained, and yet the thought of escape never left us. And winter was fierce. At work in the quarry our friend Petya Dargak got frostbite. His legs turned blue, swollen, and in 3 days our friend was gone. We were all frostbitten, but by a miracle we held on. The Nazis were going wild. They wore mourning for the army of Paulus, defeated and captured on the Volga. Anger was boiling in them, and for the slightest fault, or even without any fault at all, we were mercilessly beat. January, February, March passed in agony. Now the spring sun has warmed up. People are a little cheerful. And not only the sun is the reason for that, things are getting better at the front. Even in the fascist death camp, people, 1 foot in the grave, feel themselves a part of the people, live their joys and sorrows. Our camp is a piece of Sevastopol. Among the prisoners of Bajarov are former defenders of Sevastopol. They didn't surrender. No, it's not their fault that the circumstances were such. These sailors and soldiers, who fought to the last possible opportunity on a piece of Crimean land, found themselves in the hands of the enemy when they exhausted all their strength in the struggle. So the enemy seized the burned, destroyed city. But the proud spirit of Sevastopol is not broken, just as the will of our people can never be broken. Such people can be killed, but no one can conquer them. There have been dozens of escapes from the camp. All of them were unsuccessful, and comrades paid for them with their lives. And yet I hear more and more talk of escape. Our group develops plan after. Sometimes they sound fantastic, and we, once again weighing everything, reject them. No matter how hard it is to postpone the realization of your cherished dream, we think and argue again and again. There's no need to risk it all. We just let one of us try it first. The choice fell on me. From time to time we are sent to Bajarovo station to load empty ammunition containers into rail cars. What if we climb into one of these crates? Together we thought over all the details. After all, it is necessary to take care that as few people as possible suffered in case of failure. On April 15, almost all the inhabitants of the camp were sent for loading work in Bajarovo. I got an exemption from the paramedic and was not included in any of the brigades. So when my disappearance was discovered, there would be nowhere to take hostages. When the convoy was leaving the gate, I stealthily joined it. During the loading, my comrades put me in a large box and carried me into the car. The guards did not notice anything. They conscientiously made sure that exactly as many people left the wagon as entered it. In the evening, the train started. I felt at liberty, but at the nearest station I was taken off. Afterwards, it became known that it was a provocateur, one of those whom the camp authorities constantly sent into our environment. That was it. I had to sell my life for more money. I fought with the police, fought them off with my fists, feet even bit them, let them shoot me right away. But the Germans wouldn't let them. They ordered to bring the fugitive alive. Bloody, beaten beyond belief. I was dragged on a rope to the camp and locked in a punishment cell. In the morning, the camp heard the blows on the rail. It was the hour of my death. They opened the door. They untied me. During the night, my whole body had become stiff and numb, and my arms and legs had blue scars from the ropes. I couldn't walk. The policemen dragged me under their arms. It seemed the line of prisoners froze in silence. Near the kitchen, I saw a scaffolding like a stage. On it stood some major surrounded by a pack of police. I was led between the rows of prisoners, dragged onto the scaffolding and placed facing the prisoners. The interpreter began to read the order. He was long and tedious. I could vaguely grasp the meaning. But I understood nevertheless that the camp authorities had changed and the new commandant did not want the bright day of his inauguration to be overshadowed by the death penalty. Therefore, the fugitive is replaced by a more humane punishment. He will receive 20 lashes, and then he will be smeared with soot and tied to the post of shame for 24 hours. But the commandant warns that if the lesson is not learned and escape attempts are repeated, the guilty will be shot without mercy. The crowd breathed a sigh of relief and roared. The flattered major smiled, and I did not know whether to rejoice or grieve. They tore off my clothes, laid me on my belly on a wide bench, and tied my hands and feet to it. A big policeman, nicknamed Bugai, whom I had bitten my arm while fighting back yesterday, came up to me. Grinning evilly, he rolled up his sleeves. Now he was going to take his anger out on me, and there would be no pity from this bandit. He swung a thick rubber whip. After the fourth blow, I lost consciousness. I woke up when I was splashed with cold water. I was already lying on the ground. The bogey was wiping the sweat off his animal face. He growled, "If you live, dog, you'll remember me forever." Yeah, you can't forget a guy like that. I still have blue stripes on my back. Another policeman took a large brush and began to smear diluted soot on my face, on the fresh wounds. Soon I was as black as a Negro. Then they dragged me to a post in the middle of the yard, lifted me a meter off the ground and tied me to it. I dangled on the ropes which cut deeper and deeper into my body. Unbearable pain was torturing my mind. Every now and then I fell into unconsciousness. When I woke up, I felt the sun burning intolerably, and even worse were the flies that swarmed over my tortured body. Even the sentry assigned to me was uncomfortable. I saw his automatic rifle trembling in his hands. In the evening, the flies were replaced by mosquitoes. The sentry was still kind-hearted. He gave me a sip of water from a flask. Chasing the mosquitoes away from me with a branch, he swept them off me. So I hung on the pole for 24 hours. The inscription on the plaque on my chest read, "This is the fate of anyone who tries to escape from the camp." In the end, I felt nothing. Sometimes fainting can be a lifesaver. In the morning, I was taken down from my cross. They allowed my comrades to carry me to the stables. I was thrashing about in the heat, delirious. My friends never left me alone for a minute. A prisoner of war camp paramedic secretly gave Nikolai Doroshev bandages, iodine, some powders. My comrades treated and dressed my wounds, changed cold compress and nursed me until I recovered a little. In the evening, coming back from work, they brought something tasty, an egg, a pie, a soaked apple, treats that we had not seen for a long time. When I asked where these fabulous things came from, the boys smiled. These are gifts for you from Badgerov. They know about everything there and want to help you too. So a few days later, I went to work. The paramedic said to go with everyone else, because the police insist that you be transferred to the infirmary. Whoever went there never came back. Maybe they killed the sick there on purpose. Who knows? But we feared the infirmary more than fire. Petya Degok died in the barn from gangrene, but he refused to go to the infirmary. I couldn't work, of course, at first. Friends and complete strangers helped me out by doing what was assigned to me. The post of shame made me the most popular man in the camp. The front was coming up. So we judged this by the increased frequency of Soviet air raids and how short German pilots' flights had become. Fascists were worried. We rejoiced at the changes and at the same time were worried. How Hitlerites will deal with us when our troops will come up. They said that in such cases all prisoners of the camps were destroyed. In June 1943, the camp inhabitants were divided into two groups. The healthier people were selected for one group, and the sick ones for the other. We were separated. 2-pound brothers Nikolai and Alexei Doroshev were taken to the group of healthy people. Leonid Maximenko, Vladimir Kislenko, and I got into the other one. We looked really ugly, skin and bones. They jokingly called us deserters from the Three Trumpets. There were 104 of us. One night we were ordered to gather our belongings and were driven to the station. We were loaded into freight cars. No bunks, no straw. They locked the doors tightly. Lenya Maximenko, Volodya Kislenko, and I tried to get into one car. The train had been running for several hours already. In the overcrowded car is stuffiness, heat, nothing to breathe, moaning, raving patients. And we're at it again, working out a new escape plan. Now it seems easier to us. We'll leave the Crimea. In the morning, Maximenko suggested we clean up the carriage. We raked the garbage into a corner, put the sick in a better place. And then we found out that 3 prisoners had died during the night. They were taken to one place. At a small station, the train stopped. We started banging on the door. An escort came up. We told him that 3 of our comrades had died. We had to bury them. We demanded to give the people water and parachute in the wagon. The Hitler, who spoke Russian quite well, replied with a smirk. "Don't worry, you'll all die soon, so you can be patient a little," and left. Everyone realized that they were taking us to slaughter. We became despondent. Volodya Kislenko suggested, "You know what, friends, let's play a farewell song to the Crimea, to the sea." And the song began. "The sea is wide open," sang the prisoners. The song was ringing louder and louder. It was as if the grief was forgotten with it. On the second day, the train passed Perikop. Here is Ukraine. The prisoners are reaching for the grated window. Maximenko and Kislenko began to talk to other prisoners about escape. Many agreed, but some shook their heads dejectedly. "We'll take it as it comes. We can't run away. We can't even walk a kilometer. We'll get hit by the wind. We need to recover a little to get better." So wait for the fascists to blow you to kingdom come. Some half-station the carriage was opened. We took out the corpses that had already begun to decompose and buried them by the railroad tracks. We were allowed to bring water and some food. On the way to fetch water, Maximenko and I picked up a large iron crutch. Maybe it would come in handy. And the train was rolling forward again. Here is already Belarus. It's again the station. An old man with an oil can was walking from car to car, lubricating the axles. He approached our carriage. I asked him in a half-whisper, "Father, what station is this?" "Zitkovici, my son." "No, father," I said to him again, "you see for yourself who we are, what kind of people we are. Tell me, how far are the partisans in these places?" The old man looked left and right and quietly answered, "The partisans are all around here. Run. The Germans are afraid to even set foot in the forest. If you don't leave here, you're finished. They're taking you to a death camp. Today, several such echelons have already passed by." A German came running up, worried that the old man had stayed long at the wagon. The old man went up. The train has moved on. My heart was beating frantically. It's now or never, but how? It would take a long time to break the floor, and we'd bring the rest of our comrades to justice. Why didn't they say anything? We should try to throw ourselves out of the window. Of course, it's dangerous. You can get maimed, but there is no other way out. I look out the window. It's already dark. The woods are all around, and it's as if the driver has overheard our thoughts. The train slows down. I use a crutch to tear off the grey. Look, I say to Volodya, we see two big trees. Gather under them. Well, come on. My friends gave me a lift. I squeezed through the window, hung on my hands for a moment, and, pushing off, flew under the embankment. I bruised my shoulder and head badly during the fall, but nothing. I recovered quickly. Maximenko and Kislenko threw out after me and crawled towards the forest. The guards noticed us and opened fire. We can't waste a second. We jump up and run. I turn around. The train doesn't stop, although it's going very slowly. Bullets buzz around us. Flares fly into the sky. I see someone else jumped off. Suddenly Volodya fell. What happened to you? I don't know. I think I broke my leg. We're examining him. No, it's not broken. Bullet hit him. We put a tourniquet around his leg, using some twine we had in our pockets. It's only a short walk to the forest. We drag Volodya. He doesn't moan. He just keeps saying, "Brothers, don't leave him." I shouted at him, "Don't whimper. We'll die ourselves, but we won't leave you in trouble." The law of the fleet. The train never stopped. The shooting stopped. We see two men running towards us. We throw ourselves on the ground. A chase? My heart is pounding. What should we do? Run. But that would mean abandoning our comrade. No, whatever happens, footsteps are very close. One of the runners caught on a bush, fell. He cried, "Wait a minute, something's wrong with my leg. The guys are not far from here somewhere. We agree to meet at 2 pine trees. I take a breath with relief, screaming like a man possessed. "Yeah, comrades, here we are. Let's go this way." And here we are together. On the outside, friends, on the outside, ahead darkens the mighty forest. Our new friends are Mikhail Dutchenko, a Marine, and Ivan Balashov, an army man. "So they opened fire on you," says Balashov. There was a crush in the carriage. Everyone was climbing to the window, interfering with each other. The giant Dutchenko even had to work with his fists to force his way through. He first pushed me and another comrade out, and then jumped out himself. Someone else grabbed me by the leg, Mavs the sailor. I had to leave half of my navy klesh in the car. Indeed, he is now wearing one pant leg. And then we were running under fire. A comrade ahead of me fell down. I bumped into him, looked at him, and he was dead. Volodya Kislenko groaned. "We forgot all about him." I told the guys, "Now here's the thing, comrades. We're military men and we know what discipline means. We must choose a commander. His word will be the law for everyone. Only then we'll be able to do something." I was elected commander at Leonid Maximenko's suggestion, probably because I was considered a senior among my friends in the camp. Maximenko became my assistant. The first thing we did was to remove the tourniquet, and, before it was completely dark, to examine Kislenko's wound. Fortunately, it was not so dangerous. The bullet had passed below the kneecap without hitting the bone, but Volodya had lost a lot of blood and was very weak. Maximenko plucked plantain leaves and put them on the wound. Misha Dutchenko took off his undershirt and tore it into bandages. They bandaged the leg as best they could. It would do for now. Then we decided to find the killed comrade and bury him. I hadn't given up hope that he might be alive, but Misha Dutchenko hadn't seen him in a hurry. We searched for 20 minutes. Where did he go? It was dangerous to stay near the railroad. The Germans were sure to guard it, and the train could start searching for fugitives. We were about to go back when Misha Dutchenko found whom we were looking for. Yes, the comrade is dead. We carried him to an old trench nearby. We covered him with earth and put fresh branches on top. Maybe later we'll be able to come back here and bury our comrade properly. No matter how painful it was for us, but our conscience before our comrade is clear. We didn't leave his body for the enemy. Bared our heads, we stand at the grave. I'm telling my friends, we don't even know his name. We don't know who he was or where he came from, but he died free. After taking Volodya, we're heading for the forest. We carry him, changing all the time. Though he is light, but we are so exhausted that some 200 meters seemed to us a huge distance. In the woods, we sit down to rest. The wounded man asked for a drink. Dutchenko went on a reconnaissance. He came back quickly. We were wary. Is there trouble? I found water, Mikhail says excitedly. 2 comrades, taking tin cans, which replaced for us both wokes and mugs, went with him. The water was in the hole. It had accumulated after the rain, and although it was infused with fallen leaves, it seemed very tasty. Since we gave the wounded man a drink and drank it ourselves. We decided not to go further. We found a gully and covered its bottom with leaves and branches. Before laying down to rest, I distribute the duty. We will take turns to guard our camp. In the morning, a strong dew fell. We were awakened by the hum of birds. How long we haven't heard them? It was already dawning. A train rumbled through the trees. We had to get up and go further into the forest. Volodya Kislenko raised his head. He says he feels better. You know, guys, if I had a pair of crutches, I'd hobble myself. A sailor doesn't want to bother his comrades, but we tell him not to talk nonsense. We have enough strength to carry him to the end of the world. Maximenko and Dutchenko are ahead. That's our reconnaissance. 200 meters behind them, Balashov and I carry the wounded Volodya Kislenko around the forest. Tall pines and oaks melded crowns. It's semi-dark below, smells of fresh greenery, wet from... We can't breathe. We can't believe that we are out in the wild. We come out to the edge of the forest, low hills densely overgrown with grass. When you look more closely, you will find piles of ashes under the lush vegetation. Some black pillars stick out above the hills, burnt stovepipes. That's all that's left of the village burned by the Nazis. We must find some shelter. You can't wander around in the woods with a wounded man in your arms. He needs to rest. There are no houses, but there are cellars. We find one of them. It's damp, dark. It's all right, it'll do. We pulled some herbs, made a bed for Volodya, got some water. The boy's leg is quite bad, swollen and red. Volodya reassures us that he feels well. Maximenko is treating him with plantain. It doesn't help much. Now we'd need a good doctor, medicine, food. We're healthy, but we're barely alive from hunger. Misha Dutchenko brought a bunch of grass. Near's breakfast, friends. Misha says that in his homeland this plant is called gritsiki. He assures me that it is very tasty and full of vitamins. On Misha's advice, we peel the stalks and chew them. Sour, tart, not much of a delicacy. Besides, we've overdone it. Our stomachs are a bit sore. Dutchenko stays with Volodya. Maximenko will guard them upstairs, and Balashov and I go in search. Where are the partisans? We wandered till evening. We've already gone much deeper into the forest. We're tired, perhaps, and return to comrades will not have enough strength, and the pain in the stomach does not go away. We look for a quiet corner to spend the night in the bushes, and suddenly we catch the smell of smoke. A bonfire? We circled around for another hour, smelling the smoke. Already at dusk, we noticed a glimmer in the bushes. We crawl closer. A tent made of branches. The entrance is curtained with sod. We lie in wait. A boy with an armful of brushwood appeared, pulled back the curtain. Now we can see the fire. He is in the hut. I sheepishly into them. Watch and I'll go. A woman's voice is heard from the hut. I lift the sod. The woman gasped and clutched the child to her. 2 more boys are clinging to her. They all look at me with horror. I realize that my appearance would frighten anyone. A bearded, dirty ragamuffin, skinny as a skeleton. I try to calm the landlady. I tell her who I am. I tell her I'm not alone. There's a friend in the bushes. The woman is a little out of breath. I thought you were a woodsman. I call Balashov. We sit down by the fire. The hostess fussed, took out a pot of boiled, unpeeled potatoes. Eat up. I have nothing else. We are hungry to the extreme, but we refuse. We understand how difficult it is for a mother with 3 small children. She assures us she has more. While we are working with potatoes, the woman told us why she lives in the forest. The fascists and their henchmen are atrocious. They drive old and small people into huts and burn them alive. All of them are considered partisans. Only a few families escaped from the village where they used to live. The partisans snatched them out of the hands of the punishers. Now many are taking shelter in the thicket. To our question, how do we meet the partisans? The woman replied, I don't know anything. There are many partisans, but they don't tell us where they are. Her eldest son, a boy of about 10 years old, intervened in the conversation. He advised us to go to a village that had just been burned by the Germans. Maybe we would meet someone there. The mother looked reproachfully at the boy, and he fell silent. They thanked the hostess and began to say goodbye. We asked her if she had any clean rags to bandage our wounded comrade. She gave us a piece of cloth and a vial of iodine. We thanked her again. The boy volunteered to show us the way. We had already left the hut when the hostess caught up with us. She gave us a bundle. Here I have boiled beans, potatoes, and some bread. Take it for the wounded. Our little guide Kostya turned out to be a clever boy. In a few minutes we were already close to our home. Letting the boy go, we hurried to please our friends. We divided the food we had brought and left all the bread for Volodya. Bandaging was postponed till dawn. The next day, Maximenko, Dutchenko and I went to the burnt village Kostya had told us about. We hid at the edge of the forest. In the place of the village there is a black ash heap. It still smells of cinders, since we lay there for 3 hours. Not a sound. Lenya Maximenko couldn't take it any more. We could sit like this for a month. Quiet. Sechenko froze, listening. Now we can hear a child's voice. Last night 2 of them came to our house. Scary. We were scared. Then Mom gave them food. I saw them off. I noticed right away that they were nice. It's where are they staying? It's a man's voice. Why didn't you recognize it, Kostik? They wouldn't let me go any further. The older one must have been tricky. When they got to the path, he sent me back, but I told them to come to this place. We're lying still. My comrade commander, they shouldn't go far. Maybe they're waiting for us in the meadow? See, the word comrade dispelled all our doubts. I came out of the meadow. In the clearing there were 3 armed men and a boy. Kostik rushed to me. From comrade commander, here he is. I told you so. The commander asked where the others were. But I do not yet know who you are. Kostya answered cheerfully for him. These are partisans. They're from our village. Uncle Misha is their commander. I call Maximenko and Dutchenko. Let's get acquainted. It turns out that we are facing a partisan sabotage group. Returning from a mission, they visited a hut in the forest, and the landlady told them about us. Where's your wounded comrade? We're leading the partisans to our hideout. They untie their bags and take out bread and lard. Help yourselves, you're fattening yourselves on Hitler's food. I'm afraid you'll fall down on the way. I'll send for a carriage. We assure you that we will go to the end of the world. The commander waved his hand. Shut up. Let's at least crawl to the hut, because you can't come here with a cart. The police are on the prowl. The owner of the forest hut met us as old acquaintances. A cart was already waiting here. They put us on a cart. They drove us to the swamp. There was no further road. The partisans carried Volodya in their arms. We followed them into the water. Sometimes it was up to our waists. Finally, we got on dry land. A partisan patrol checked what kind of people. Another kilometer we moved along a barely visible path. They heard a noise, a clamour, as the trees thinned, and in the clearing we saw dugouts and huts. Children were running around. It was explained to us that this was a partisan forest village. Here live peasants who fled from the Nazis. There are many such villages. All of them are protected by partisans. At the last dugout we were stopped by armed men, guards. The villagers came running. Having learned who we are, women brought milk, potatoes, lard, bread, but the commander took it all away. They can't eat too much. They'll get sick after starvation. We'll consult a doctor. They washed us in a bathhouse, gave us clean clothes, and burned the camp clothes. We were given a cozy dugout. Volodya was bandaged. This care of complete strangers moved me to tears. What it means to be among one's own. A doctor came and examined Kislenko's wound, and in the morning Volodya was taken to the infirmary. We were surprised by the calmness of people in the village. The children were running around all day, making noise. In the evening, almost the whole population gathers together. Jokes, laughter. A song is played in chorus. Aren't you afraid that the Germans will come? I ask one of the peasant women. Why should we be afraid of them? Don't let them shiver in fear. They won't come here. We are the masters here. A partisan land. The guard adds. Secessists are entrenched and sitting in their garrisons, and we add to the fear. In the evening we shoot at their hovels. They don't sleep all night long, firing all the weapons in the forest. It's what we call a nerve-wracking tactic. It works well. In short, the mood of the people is cheerful, even carefree, it seemed to me. People feel like they're in complete control here. You bet. Entire partisan districts have been formed where there is Soviet power and people work together. As before in collective farm, the partisans have their own airfields where airplanes from the great land arrive. We were resting, recovering. Idleness was beginning to wear us down. We pestered our new friends. When will they give us a job? Grow meat first. It's scary to look at your balls. We thought in vain that the people in the forest village were carefree. One day the village was unrecognizably transformed. It was when it became known that the Nazis were preparing another raid. Instantly women and children disappeared. They were sent deeper into the forest, all the men, and there were about 30 of them, armed themselves. We, too, were given 2 handheld machine guns. With what excitement we held the weapons in our hands. We are fighters again back in the ranks. But it did not come to a fight. The neighbouring detachment dealt the Punishers a crushing blow from ambush and dispersed them. The population returned to the forest village as if nothing had happened. The cheerful voices of children rang out. From the partisan infirmary reported the news that saddened us. Volodya Kislenko had to have his leg amputated. He was sent by plane to Moscow. It is hard to realize that we will no longer see this quiet but brave guy, ready to go to any danger to help a comrade. He was like that on the armored train and in the terrible year of captivity. We're not recognized as real partisans yet. We can't wait to go on a combat mission, but for now our destiny is to sit unseen in a forest village. We're digging fortifications, new dugouts. We felt offended when all 4 of us were enlisted in the economic platoon commander Kuzma Gritsar, a puny little guy in the lead, seeing our gloomy faces, sighed with the... It's like this. No one wants to go to the platoon, even the girls. Don't be upset, guys. We go on missions too. We look at him incredulously. Why? He's on fire. Do you think it's easy to dig up potatoes from under the noses of the fascists? Indeed, we had to work under fire. Each sack of food was worth a lot of labor and risk. Our commander, despite his very unmilitary appearance, turned out to be a man of courage and initiative. We learned that in peacetime he also worked as a logger. He knows the area like the back of his hand, and we never returned empty-handed. Still, we parted with the platoon without regret when we were offered to join Colonel Frenkel's group. It consisted of fighters of regular troops who found themselves in the enemy rear during the retreat of our army. Now Frenkel was ordered to break through the front line. Prepared for this operation for several weeks. It seems that everything was foreseen. But it was unsuccessful. Not everyone managed to break through the front. In the battles with Hitlerites, many died. Others had to hide in the forests, fighting off the Punishers. With a handful of fighters, we with Michael Dutchenko, after countless skirmishes with Hitlerites, got in a partisan detachment for the Soviet motherland. Maximenko and Balashov acted in another detachment, and we knew nothing about their fate. Life again separated the friends. The commander of the detachment, VP Babich, and the Commissar E. Karinsky received us cordially, but when we began to ask to send us on a combat mission faster, Vasily Pavlovich Babich, you sailors are impatient people. In fact, I have a combat mission for you. Will you send us to sabotage? We cheerfully cheered up. Commander squinted sly. No, not yet, but I'll give you an assignment no less important. Teach our guys military training. You are experienced, learned, and fire-scarred people. You have the cards in your hands. So we suddenly found ourselves in the role of instructors. We conducted formation exercises, taught the village boys how to handle weapons. The detachment command closely monitored the progress of training. The commander and commissar were often present at the classes, and when the course of sciences was passed, Babich himself took credits. He was satisfied with both students and instructors. By the way, the initiative of our detachment was echoed throughout the guerrilla unit. Military training with systematic classes and credits were introduced everywhere. In the evening, free from tasks and outfits, partisans gathered in a tight circle. They began to tell stories about military affairs. Dutchenko and I listened with bated breath. They asked us where we had been and what we had seen. I talked about the battles near Odessa and Sevastopol, about the bravery of our sailors. My words made a strong impression. The guerrillas followed the defense of Sevastopol closely. Commissar Ilya Ilyich Zakarinsky, having been to several such conversations, said, "You know, your stories about Sevastopol are very useful, but it's getting uncomfortable for me. I'm describing heroic feats and I'm sitting in the rear. It's all right, bear with me. Soon it will be your turn." And finally, we go to the real work. On a rainy day, our small group left the camp in the forest. In a duffel bag, each of us has a wooden box, homemade mines. Leads us on a mission Chief of Staff Repin. Not reaching about 10 kilometers to the station, my shunker stopped. Distributed duties. With me will go to the railroad line Misha Dutchenko, a young partisan Grisha Basov, and a very young boy. Basov and I crawled to the embankment. The rest are covering us, sitting down with a machine gun in the bushes. The Germans are close. To the right and left of us, 300 meters away, enemy pillboxes. From there, every now and then, machine guns, flares fly up into the dark, cloudy sky. When we were already under the embankment, two black figures appeared on it, Basov and I, crammed into a ditch. We waited until the patrol disappeared in the darkness. Now it's time. It seems I'm not a novice. I've been in so many bindings. My hands and feet are shaking. I'm climbing up the embankment. In the distance, a faint murmur. It's a train. We must hurry. Scraping off my nails, I dug a hollow between the sleepers, laid a mine, but the primer does not lie on the rail. Tis a session of the group commander to put the primer in the joint of the rails, and the noise of the train is increasing. I'm crawling on wet gravel, looking for the damn joint. There it is. I put the mine again, attach the primer, break the cord. The train's coming around the bend. Will I be able to escape? I roll down the embankment, scraping my face and hands on the thorns. I bruised my knee. Limping, I run. A train rumbles by. I fall into some pit. I wait. No explosion. Did I plant the wrong mine? I want to get up. And that's when the night was lit up by blinding lightning. A roaring hurricane passes overhead, rumbling, scraping, creaking. Now we have to run away before the Nazis rush here. I'm running and I don't know where. Then tracer machine guns from both pillboxes struck. It helped me to orient myself. If the Germans had delayed shooting, I would have run right into a pillbox. I ran towards the forest. At the edge of the forest I stopped. I wanted to look at the work of my hands. I couldn't believe my eyes. A river of fire was blazing. Apparently the whole train was loaded with fuel, tiny black shadows flickering against the flames. And the firing is unimaginable. I can't believe that all this was done by a small box, so clumsy and harmless in appearance. And where is Grigory Basov? And the others? I wandered around the forest for about 20 minutes. Finally, I hear a quiet whistle. I hurry to it. Here they are, Misha, Grigory, the guide. They're playing it cool, but I see that they're no less scared than I am. Ashamed they left me alone. I tell them off in a whisper, not very angry. I understand their condition. I myself almost lost my head with the unaccustomed. All right, they say, the first pancake is a pancake, and the train was destroyed after all. But the main thing, perhaps, in another way, the two sailors were convinced that it is not easier to fight in the forest than in the mountains near Sevastopol, and there's no need to get cocky, to wonder about their combat past. You must learn, from the basics to learn, and how to put mines, and how to navigate in the forest, and how to really help each other. When we returned to the forest village, they already knew about our luck. They congratulated us. We felt ourselves equal members of the partisan family. In July 1943, the Belarusian headquarters of the partisan movement ordered the Polesky and Minsk partisan units to organize a harvest in the areas under their control. The harvest was good, so it is necessary to dispose of it in a good way, so that not a pood of grain, potatoes, vegetables did not go to the occupants. Our 100th Brigade, which included detachments named after Badione, named after Kalinin and for the Soviet motherland, was to help harvest the peasants of the Glusky district. Each detachment got its own zone. Our sponsored are residents of the village of Bobrovichi. Before to start harvesting, it was necessary to clear the area from Hitlerites and Polizei, and the fascists were hungry for bread. They sent from Bobruisk a punitive detachment of 500 soldiers with 4 guns, 6 armoured cars and mortars. There was also a police detachment, headed by the old traitor Makarov. While the main mass of partisans together with peasants harvested bread, part of the forces was directed to fight against the Punishers, a group of 60 men under the command of the Chief of Staff of the Brigade P.G. Higumanov was given the task to distract Hitlerites and Polizei, who had settled in the village Zalesye. We inconspicuously approached the Nazi garrison and opened fire. Germans, having noticed that we are a little, went in attack. The battle lasted half an hour. We began to run out of ammunition. Higumanov ordered to withdraw little by little into the forest. Dutchenko and I, with hand machine guns, were in the rear guard. We let the Hitlerites closer, covered them with fire, and then, hiding behind the trees, we moved to a new place. The Punishers were getting farther into the thicket. This was expected by lurking on the other side of the village units, led by experienced commanders Zygarev and Pavlovsky. They struck from the rear, and panic began among the Punishers. After a 3-hour battle, Hitlerites and Polizei retreated, having lost up to 200 people wounded and killed. The German command sent new forces from Bobruisk, but by that time the harvest was finished. The peasants generously shared the harvested grain and other products with their defenders, partisans. Far away from us, near Kursk, a historic battle was being fought in those days. Helping the Soviet troops, the partisans of Belarusia destroyed the railroads used by the enemy to supply their front. Our brigade still operated mainly in the area of Myshanka station. Partisans first knocked out the fascist garrisons from here, and then destroyed more than a kilometre of railway track, a bridge, station facilities, burned a loaded train, and put out of action all communication lines. Bombers Basenko, Shpakovsky, Tarakovich, Poplevsky, Proksky, Gatsuk, Ignatiev, Namesnikov worked well. In this operation, Mikhail Dutchenko and I became firm friends with Ivan Tarakovich and Konstantin Poplavsky, fearless, desperate guys. We happened to take part in the battle for the bridge over the river. Hitlerites vigilantly guarded the bridge. They found the partisans 200 meters from the shore, opened heavy fire. We had to lie down, especially bothered the bunker on the left of the bridge. Vanya Tarakovich, who was lying next to me, had already changed 2 discs, shooting at the embrasure of the enemy firing point. Here, after a long line of his machine gun, the Bozov fell silent. Partisans rose, ran forward, but the enemy point again came to life. "Let's try to crawl through that ditch over there," Konstantin Poplavsky offered me. "Leave the machine gun, Dutchenko. We won't need it." Here, he handed me 2 hand grenades. We crawled along the ditch. At that time, Commissar Zakharinsky and his group began to move southward, distracting the attention of fascist machine gunners. We took advantage of this and crept along the ditch unnoticed. And our grenades flew into the breach. Machine gun choked. The Commissar raised the partisans. Forward. Ours had already run to the bridge, as the cues whipped again. At that time, Kostya and I were standing on the roof of the bunker and confusedly watched as, sticking out of the embrasure, the machine gun barrel turned from side to side and spewed fire and flame, and we didn't have a single grenade left. Kostya was cursing at the top of his voice, and then a crowbar caught his eye. He grabbed it and hit the barrel with all his might. The machine gun went silent, and a second later the door opened and a German crawled out of the bunker with his arms raised. Soon the blown-up bridge collapsed into the water. The front was rapidly approaching the Belarusian land. The Parachi corridor was already formed, through which the partisan region could communicate with the big land. From day to day we waited for the arrival of our troops, but the autumn thaw suspended the offensive. The front stabilized. This allowed the German command to throw new forces to suppress the guerrilla movement. The Parachi corridor was destroyed. The enemy surrounded the partisan areas from all sides. Communication with the big land could now be carried out only by air, and rains washed away all the landing sites. Airplanes had to drop ammunition in bags. Having received the replenishment, the Punishers went straight through. Battles in the forest did not subside. In these difficult days, our former commander VP, Babichar, was transferred to another detachment, and Pavel Mikhailovich Yunevich, a man well known to the Belarusian partisans, was assigned to us. At one time, he organized the first partisan detachment in these parts. Fascists more than once put big awards on his head. Pavel Mikhailovich is a reserved, not wordy. If he said it, it means it will be done. He looks stern, thick black eyebrows are always frowning, but in fact, a kind, simple and open soul, caring, attentive to people, he was universally loved. On a share of the new commander from the first days fell all anxieties and tests connected with strengthening of activity of Punishers. Hitlerites attacked the village Slobodka, where at that time the detachment was located. We were ordered to give a fight here, to crack the enemy thoroughly, and then to go to the island Zagali through the swamp, having previously sent there all the inhabitants of the village. The Germans attacking us launched tankers ahead of us. Armoured gunner Pavel Prokotsky shot one of them with an anti-tank gun before my eyes. The second, even earlier, was blown up on a mine. The tankets did not go further. Seeing that we could not be taken head-on, the enemy tried to bypass the village from the floodplain. But there he was met by a group of partisans under the command of the Chief of Staff, Repin. The forces were unequal. The commander realized that Repin would not last long and ordered our second company to hit the Hitlerites in the flank. We approached the place of battle by woods and opened fire. Together with me, with hand machine guns, Mikhail Dutchenko and Ivan Tarakovich ran from tree to tree. The battle lasted until evening. Under the cover of darkness, the detachment left the village, and the Germans shelled it all night from guns and mortars. In the morning, they finally broke into the empty village and burned it to the ground. After that, we fought for 3 days near the village of Bobrovichi, until its entire population was evacuated to the island. Only then we retreated to the swamp. Here we saw with our own eyes the care with which our new commander treats people. It turned out that in the tract near Bobrovichi remained 2 families of partisans who had not had time to move away with the rest of the villagers. Yunevich called me. "That's what, sailor, take 5 or 6 guys with you and get here." Matti indicated a point on the map. "Take the men out before the Germans come the forest." 6 partisans went with me, and of course Misha Dutchenko, Vanya Tarakovich and Kostya Poplavsky were among them. Seeing us off, Yunevich warned Ish, "Keep your eyes open. Don't get ambushed. The night is dark, even if you poke your eyes out." But Tarakovich and Poplavsky confidently led us through the swamp. The closer the village, the brighter it became. The fire glow was flaming over the forest, chandeliers of rockets were hanging. At dawn we found women and children huddled in the thicket. We quickly gathered them for the road. I sent Misha Dutchenko and Poplavsky to scout. They came back in 3U. With them came an elderly collective farmer, Fedos Nekhybov, a resident of Bobrovichi. The old man had been to many places. He brought alarming news. Nearby villages are almost all burned down. The Punishers are capturing the inhabitants hiding in the forests. Yesterday, 150 peasants were driven to the village of Lyaskovichi, locked in a barn and burned. Around Bobrovichi, Hitlerites are also combing the woods, and they will look into this tract. We must leave quickly. Having found out that we were going to Zagalje, Uncle Fidos saddened us. The village was already in the hands of Hitlerites, so we still have to look for our detachment. Guys and a reconnaissance. Guys immediately return, Germans all around. We will wait for the evening. We agree. If the fascists approach, Neklebov, who knows every path here, will take the women and children into the thicket, and we will take the fight and cover their departure. Tarakovich, who was watching the path, reported that a platoon of Hitlerites appeared from Bobrovichi and were coming towards us. I ordered to get ready for a fight, but the Germans did not risk to get into the forest. They shelled the thickets and then lit a fire and began to warm themselves. We're only 400 meters away from them. We hid and waited. I wish it would get dark sooner. Now the forest has become an unreliable shelter. The leaves have fallen. You can see a kilometer away. From the eastern edge of the forest, the shooting rose. Hitlerites at the fire jumped on their feet, scattered in a chain, and walked in the direction of shots. So far, the trouble had passed. We took a breath. Fidos whispers to me that behind the tract on the dirt road all the time drive the Germans. "Let's mind the road," Tarakovich suggested. "We'll be here till evening anyway. We have 2 mines, we can't carry them back to the camp." "That's a good idea." Leaving everyone in the thicket, Tarakovich, Poplavsky and I make our way to the road. Right in front of us is a wooden bridge over a ditch. We booby-trapped it. We're waiting. No, dusk has fallen. It's time for us to leave. I was about to remove the mines when wheels rumbled nearby. We froze in the bushes. Wagons loaded to the top with various junk were driving along the road. The German riders were lazily trotting their horses. A little farther from them were old men and women. They were accompanied by a dozen machine gunners. Tarakovich is already aiming a machine gun. I whisper to him, "Wait until the mines go off, and then hit the machine gunners, but don't hit your own." The mines went off successfully as soon as both carts drove onto the bridge. The wreckage of the wagons was still falling around when 2 of our machine guns hit the confused Hitlerites at point-blank range. The peasants ran into the forest. They're already ordered Uncle Fidos. "Let's go along the girder here." The survived Germans ran away in the direction of burnt Bobrovichi. We had 15 more men. Having collected all of them, we marched to Zygalski Lake. In front, 3 partisans with Fidos, 3 fighters close the procession. We walk in silence. Children fearfully cling to their mothers. The fog has descended. You can't see a thing. And Fedos is walking on his own. Maybe he can even see in the dark. He brought us to the swamp. Here the rowing begins, a road of planked poles. No sooner had we felt it with our feet than we heard a shout. Halt! And an automatic rifle shot. Our charges threw themselves on the ground. Tarakovich and Prokotsky threw grenades. Groans were heard on the row. We're lying on the wet ground. Where to now? I'm asking Fedos. Is there no other way to the islands? The old man hesitated. There is one path, but it is very unreliable. Lead the way. We can't stay here. On the rowing boat the machine guns were pouring out. Tarakovich, Poplavsky, and Prokotsky held back the Hitlerites with short bursts. But soon all three withdrew. Ammunition was running out, we had to save them. We quietly sneak along the bank of the swamp. A little bit we come out of the bog. Shots crackle. One of the partisans falls dead. Mikhail Dutchenko was wounded in the arm. People are tired of walking through thick mud, in which sometimes we fall through the knee. I took everyone to a dry place. Fedos Neklibov and Pavel Prokotsky went to look for the ill-fated path. We were lost for an hour and a half. I felt like on pins and needles. We'll be here till dawn, but there was a rustling in the bushes. Uncle Fedos is all wet with a long stick in his hands. Phew, I think I've found it. Damn it. He's leading us over the bumps. Water splashed under our feet. Neklibov is in front, probing the bottom with his stick. Behind him, holding hands, the rest of us are pulling along. The cold, sticky slurry reaches up to the waist. Feet can hardly find kindling at the bottom. All this underwater path is laid with it. If you stumble, you're dead. The mire will suck you up in no time. The way seems endless. The cold makes my whole body ache. To see ahead blackens some wall. It's a forest. Only a few dozen steps left. But what else is there? Our whole chain, as if from a jolt, stopped. People are tramping in one place. I'm making my way to Fedos. The path is lost. Do we have to go back? My feet are sinking deeper and deeper. Now we're up to our chests in water. Fedos is struggling, poking in all directions with his stick. Hey, I've been there. The old man lunges forward, sinking up to his throat. Give me the stick, I said to him. But after 3 meters, it's already shallower. The bottom has sagged. Woo, Fedos explains. Let's go in one by one. Women of shorter stature plunge with their heads, but, picked up by the guerrillas, come to the surface unharmed. The children were carried by Ivan and Mikhail, the tallest of us. We do not stop on the shore, so as not to freeze the soaked people. In half an hour we are already in the camp. We were placed in warm dugouts, found dry clothes and even alcohol to rub and take inside for warming. The commander thanked for saving the peasants. I replied that it was thanks to Fedos. Without him we would have been lost. We'll thank the old man especially, and there's something to please him. The villagers found and brought Uncle Fedo's wife and daughter to the camp. And we learned that while Neklibov took us through the forests and swamps, his family almost died. They stayed in a hut near the village occupied by the Germans. Saving other women and children, Uncle Fedos almost lost his loved ones. We are trapped on the islands. Hitlerites do not dare to come here. They're waiting for the mire to be covered with ice. The islands are bombed by enemy aircraft shelled by artillery. We're running out of food supplies. We can't receive airplanes from the big land. There are no landing sites. Secretary of the party organization, never discouraged Tonon Fedorovich Pinchuk, goes around the dugouts, encourages people. He knows how to inspire support even the weakest. Partisans are happy every time he visits. He talks to the partisan. It seems that he will say nothing of the sort, but it's easier on the soul. Pinchuk fights with his whole family. His wife, Olga Mikhailovna, is also in our detachment. A nurse, and when necessary, takes up a machine gun and fights as well as a... Skonon Fedorovich talks to people, is interested in their moods, and at the same time and advises stealthily. And we are facing a vital question. To stay on the island until frost or already now, without waiting for the German offensive to make our way to the big Slavkovichi forest, where Sedering weighed everything. The command decided to break through. We went into the attack at night up to our chests in icy water. Hitlerites did not expect our breakout. After a short battle, the detachments together with all the convoys went on land and hid in the forest. Tier 2 they were short, but fierce clashes with the Punishers. In the village Starosaki, our detachment defeated the enemy garrison and freed more than 100 Soviet people whom the fascists were going to send to Germany for hard labor. We got trophies, 5 cows, potatoes, flour and groats. When breaking through the enemy ring, we lost relatively few people. Chief of Staff Egemenov was wounded in the shoulder, but he led the battle of his group until the enemy resistance was broken. Already in the forest, he fell from loss of blood. Assistant to the commander on reconnaissance, Roslik, and with him 4 soldiers were ambushed near the village of Homingo. 2 hours fought off the enemy. 3 partisans were killed, and Roslik and another comrade, both wounded, when they ran out of ammunition, let the Germans near them, and took out grenades. They were killed together with Hitlerites who rushed to them. One after another, we repel villages from the Punishers. Our partisan zone is growing. By the onset of winter, it reached the same borders that were in summer. Their punitive operation, fascists in essence did not achieve anything, and lost hundreds of soldiers and policemen. The ground was covered with snow. Pines and spruces were dressed in white coats. We are not happy about the beautiful winter. Everything is more complicated. Every step leaves a trace in the snow. It has become difficult to hide in the forest. Among the bare trees, a person can be seen from afar. It's cold and hunger. We have little food. The bases are looted by fascists. The population can't give us anything. They are poor themselves and hope for help from partisans. The only way out is to take food from the enemy. This business is entrusted in our detachment to a specially allocated group headed by Company Commander Tislyakov. It attacks German warehouses and wagons. Extracted food partisans brotherly share with the inhabitants of forest villages. The difficulties of winter did not weaken the activity of partisans. On the contrary, we even more often strike the enemy. In the detachment created 3 sabotage groups. One of them is headed by Commissar Ilya Ilyich Zakarinsky. The camp is sparsely populated, only supplies, medical workers, wounded and guards. The rest go on combat missions. Each sabotage group is assigned a certain area. We, under the leadership of Zakarinsky, usually operate on the roads between the villages of Katka, Porechi, Koromsy, Slobodka. One day we put 12 mines. 3 trucks and 1 car were blown up on them. 50 Hitlerites were killed. The same day we blew up 12 poles on the telephone line Minsk. Just returned to the camp. A new task. We were ordered to send some men to the village of Brozha. The fascists had rebuilt a mill there. It is necessary to blow it up and bring grain and flour to the camp, together with other partisans. The commissar took Tarakovich, me and Dutchenko with him. His wound had completely healed by that time. Luckily for us, a thick snow fell, the best victory for us. The mill was guarded by policemen. We managed to take them by surprise. The fight was short. The mill was in our hands. Grain and flour were loaded onto police wagons and the mill was burned. And again the mission. This time the group was led by Iostin Ilarionovich Bobrovnik, the new assistant to the commander of the detachment on reconnaissance. We should penetrate into separate enemy garrisons and meet with our informers, get information about the enemy from them, and on the way back to set up an ambush and take the tongue. We visited all the villages without much trouble, but in Porechi we had a misfire. As always, the cover group lay down on the outskirts, and Bobrovnik with 2 partisans went to the house of the contact. Time passed, and the comrades did not return. We began to worry, and we were freezing. The night was frosty, and we were wearing cotton jackets and German jackets on fish fur. On our feet, homemade poles from a single piece of rawhide. We squirm in the snow, rubbing our cheeks and noses to keep them warm. Suddenly there was an explosion, shooting. Mines began to burst on the outskirts. And in the village car engines are already humming. A motorcycle rumbled. We should have withdrawn before we were surrounded, but we couldn't abandon our comrades. And then 3 figures came out from behind the outermost hut, running towards us. Hitlerites were chasing them, shooting on the run. We opened fire, forced the Germans to lie down. As soon as Bobrovnik and his comrades equaled us, all rushed into the forest. When we caught our breath, Bobrovnik told us what had happened. At the knock from a hut instead of the partisan contact came out a Hitlerite. Bobrovnik shot him. A dozen Germans jumped out of the other house. Chilnerianovich threw a grenade and ran. We barely got away. By the way, you were silent for a long time. Said Bobrovnik. I'm sorry, I thought you had run off into the woods. He spoke in a steady voice. From the outside, no one would have believed that this man had just escaped from the clutches of death. They mined the highway this morning. They were expecting a single car, but a whole column showed up. Bobrovnik shook his head. We better not get into the tongues ourselves. Let's move away. Already in the forest we heard 2 explosions. Hitlerites on the road opened fire, so our mines have worked. But we need a tongue. We wandered along the road for a long time. We got cold and tired. Disappointed, we turned into the forest. And then we got lucky. We saw a wagon pulled by a couple of horses. There were 2 Germans in it. We captured them. So much for tongues. For a rest, we came to one of the forest villages. We were welcomed with cordiality. Bobrovnik is his own man in the whole partisan region. We were placed in a guard dugout, but we didn't have to, Royals. So contact from the village Vyanischa came and informed us that Germans and Polizei were celebrating Christmas there, committing atrocities and abusing the inhabitants. Vyanischa is the homeland of our Vanya Tarakovich. Iostin Ilarianovich, he said to Bobrovnik. Let's give the fascists partisan presents for Christmas. I'll bring them secretly. Every bush here is dear to me. After a moment's thought, Bobrovnik agreed. The prisoners were sent to the camp, and they went to the village. The police in Vyonishi was headed by Vasil Korbat. Beast. We were going to repay him for the blood of innocent people. We didn't reach the village. So our attention was drawn to a barn on the edge of the forest. A noisy group of drunken policemen crowded around it. Bobrovnik said to Tarakovich, Well, Vanyusha, set your detyar on a merry mood. Let them dance to your music. We crawled closer to the barn. Our machine guns started to work. After we counted 12 dead bodies of Polizei and Germans, only 2 escaped. There was a moonshine machine in the barn. The grandfather, who was forced by the Polizei to brew moonshine, said that Korbat also came here and showed the Germans how to brew Russian schnapps. He left only a few minutes before our attack. Among the dead were Korbat's assistant, a bearded old man, and his 3 sons. From the direction of the village came machine gun bursts. We did not wait for the Germans to arrive and hid in the forest. While we were rounding up our contacts, the brigade received several airplanes from the Great Land. They delivered weapons, ammunition, medicines and mail, letters, newspapers, magazines. We valued the printed word at that time, perhaps, more than explosives, and the people needed it very much. As soon as a partisan appeared in a village with a Soviet newspaper in his hands, he was surrounded by peasants and would not leave until the whole newspaper was read from the title to the last line. When we returned to the camp, the commissar of the brigade, Pyotr Agafonovich Chernushin, was reading to the partisans the Pravda we had just received. Along with other news, the comrades learned that in many towns and villages of the country began to collect funds for the construction of airplanes and tanks. Chernushin thoughtful look around the partisans. And why don't we get involved in this endeavor? Let's raise funds for a partisan tank column. Everyone liked the idea. To the commissar came Scout Sergei Vyshkovsky and gave a gold pocket watch on a chain. No, take it. This is a gift from my father, but I'm not sorry. Let this gold chain tighten around Hitler's neck. A table was brought in. Money, valuables, bonds were poured on it. The commissar didn't have time to take notes, and then at the suggestion of Volodya Sisoev, secretary of the Komsomol organization, partisan envoys went to the villages of Ripino, Krasnaya Sloboda, Gorodyachici, Zhivan Podlog, Slavkovice. The inhabitants of those villages, where fascist garrisons stood, also heard about the fundraising and wanted to take part in the creation of a partisan tank column. In a few days only, the detachment for the Soviet motherland collected and sent to the big land about 50,000 rubles in money and different valuables for about the same amount. At the end of January 1944, we endured a heavy battle near the village Albinsk. Having pulled up the troops, Hitlerites tried to surround us here. We lay in a chain on the edge of the forest near the outskirts of the village and repulsed attack after attack. There was a moment when one of the companies could not stand it and fell back. Only the machine gunners remained on the line. I noticed late that several fascists crawled very close to Tarakovich. Above his trench, a cloud of snow from the explosions of grenades soared up. My heart clenched. Vanya was gone, forgetting everything. I rushed to him, and I see him lying there, covered with snow, fiddling with his machine gun. Nearby grenades are neatly stacked. From time to time he throws them at the Hitlerites, and then he goes back to work. "What have you got?" I ask. "The cartridge chamber is jammed." He's trying to dislodge the jammed cartridge case with a ramrod. I help him, and together we start shooting at the fascists. But soon the last discs are empty. There are grenades left, 3 per barrel. We throw them. And then, it would have been bad for us, but at that time behind our backs we heard the thunderous voice of Parted Pinchuk, picked up by dozens of throats. Forward, boys. The Germans rolled back. They did not manage to surround us, but after this battle we had to move the camp. Constant attention of partisans was attracted by Warszawka, so they called the asphalt highway Warsaw, Moscow. The fascists guarded it closely, and yet explosions often rumbled over the road. At first, we put mines at night. It was more convenient and safer, but Hitlerites invented a barbaric way of demining. In the morning, they drove out crowds of inhabitants on the road. The guests laid by us at night could kill dozens of innocent people. Now we began to carry out sabotage on the road only in the daytime, and the command strictly ordered to remove all the mines that did not work. In the next sortie to the highway, we were led by Company Commander Parkomenko. With our own eyes, we saw a terrible picture. 50 half-undressed women with children and old men, lined up in rows the whole width of the road, were wandering, shivering from cold and fear. They were driven by Hitlerites and Polizei, keeping at a respectful distance. We looked at the crowd of unfortunate people. We could not help them. We had little strength, and our task was different. Several cars passed along the road. Parkomenko, watching from the hillside, missed them. He chose a more substantial target. But here he gave a sign. We ran out onto the snow-covered asphalt, laid flat white boxes and covered them with snow. Just when we had time to take cover, the trucks showed up. We have never seen such huge trucks, so heavy that the ground rumbled. A passenger car is rolling behind them. We did not take our eyes off the barely visible snow bumps. We had to see what mines would explode. The first to explode was the end truck. Then the head car jumped up. The others began to turn around. We opened fire on them. Chauffeurs jumped out of the cabs. They were mowed down by our machine gun bursts. A passenger car that lost control fell under the slope. Trucks went up in flames. They were carrying barrels of aviation gasoline. Several guerrillas ran up to the overturned Opel. There lay 2 dead officers. We take their documents and throw a grenade into the car. The observer on the hill shouted, "The armored car is coming. Let's go into the woods." An hour and a half later, we heard 2 more explosions. After that, it turned out that an armored car and a gas tanker had hit our mines. So all our guests worked, and we cannot return to the road. I would like to cite the results of the work of our partisans in just one day. Zakarinsky's group destroyed 2 cars on the road Katka, Poreshi, and blew up 2 wooden bridges. Another group, which was led by Yunovich himself, smashed a truck and seized 6 lorries with hay. In the evening of the same day, Bobrovnik and his scouts captured 3 wagons and a passenger car. Pinchuk's group took away from the Punishers about 100 people whom Hitlerites were taking to Germany, and besides captured 2 wagons with food. Igamenov dumped a car with German soldiers and officers into a ditch. Parkomenko's prey was a passenger car. It killed 5 officers and captured valuable documents. Tislenko near Glusk took away from the police 2 wagons with food and towels. I repeat, this was done by one of our detachments during a normal combat day, and there were many such detachments in Belarusia. The earth was really burning under the feet of the invaders. Till the end of March, our detachment acted on roads, disrupting enemy transportation. The invaders had no time to restore the bridges blown up by us. Several railroad trains with cargoes and replenishment for the front flew under the rock. The snow was already melting. Buds swelled on trees. We were glad to see the sun. Soon the forest will turn green again. Our reliable big earth regularly sends us airplanes with everything we need. Now we have plenty of ammunition. We are in a hurry to take advantage of it. Dozens of combat groups leave the camp for various tasks, to blow up roads and bridges, to smash small enemy garrisons. Little by little things are getting better with food. We now have our own airfield, where we receive airplanes almost without interference. The wounded requiring serious treatment are sent by air to the big land. My friends and I are rarely in the camp. Only we fulfill one task. We get another. At the end of April, our group under the command of Commissar Zakarinsky visited the village of Holopinichi, where a large German garrison was stationed. Ivan Tarakovich and Nikolai Zelenkov mined the bridge near the outskirts of the village. The mines blew up a passenger car. in which, as it turned out later, a representative of Hitler's headquarters and 3 senior officers of the German army were traveling. None of them was saved. On the way to the camp, we met people from the village of Dubrovo. They told us that the police were brutalizing them. They took the last of their goods, and many people were taken away somewhere. In the village, the police captured 6 partisans from Polonichek's unit. 5 of them were executed here. They carved stars on their backs and sprinkled salt on them. You live in the forest without salt, so we'll give you some. Then they gouged out their victims' eyes, cut off their noses and ears, and finally shot them. One of the partisans survived and took him away with them. How long ago did they leave? The commissar asked. Just now. They're probably going rowing now. Obviously. How many of them? About 50. Ilya Ilyich was thinking. There are only 25 of us, but the armament of the group is decent. 3 machine guns, 15 automatic rifles. The others have carbines and grenades. Let's go, decided the commissar. We moved at a quick march to the row. Here we set up an ambush. 10 men lay down on the edge of the forest near the road 5B, in the clearing the rest, in the birch in front of the swamps. Unsuspecting, the police approached the ambush. 10 mounted men in front, followed by 5 laden wagons, then 50 captive peasants. The column was closed by 40-foot police and 4 Germans. "Oh, death to traitors and traitors," shouted the commissar, running out of the bushes, and began to mow down the police at point-blank range with long bursts of automatic rifle fire. Following Ilya Ilyich's example, we also jumped out of hiding and opened fire. The horses staggered away. The policemen did not even have time to remove their weapons from their backs. They rushed to the clearing. There they were hit by machine guns. Fleeing from bullets, the police and Hitlerite ran into the swamp. Horses choked in the liquid mire. The policemen roared wildly, drowning in the swamp with their horses. I felt sorry for the horses. What were they suffering for? In about 10 minutes it was all over. The peasants who had scattered during the battle through the forest were gathered and told to take all the goods looted by the police. The liberated did not want to return to the village. They asked us to take them with us into the forest. We can safely say that in May there was not a night without explosions of partisan mines, without the glow of burning German warehouses. The crackle of machine guns became a familiar night music for the inhabitants of the partisan region. People's Avengers were active, helping the Soviet army. On May 9, 1944, I was called to the headquarters dugout. Squad Commander Yunovich, satisfied, radiant, gave me a piece of paper. Read, Sailor. It was the report of Sovinform Bureau recorded by the radio operator. It reported that our troops liberated 7. I congratulate you and Dutchenko from the bottom of my heart. Tell him that in honor of this event we're going out today on a big job. We're going to mine the Bobruisk-Minsk highway, and I'm entrusting you, Black Sea sailors, the current birthday boys, to put the mines. With what excitement Misha and I went on this mission. The group was led by Pavel Mikhailovich Yunovich himself. 2 trucks with soldiers were blown up on our mines. Those who were not destroyed by the explosion were shot by machine gunners. Then we put some more mines. They all worked. Traffic on the highway was stalled until the sabotageurs received an order. Sabotage and attacks on garrisons to stop, to switch entirely to intelligence gathering. We guessed that this means the front is preparing for an offensive, and the partisans took to the matter with all diligence. On the night of June 22, we were awakened by a cannonade. Its thunder rolled through the forest. The sky in the east was blazing. The front has gone. Joyful voices were heard. People shouted hurrah. Hats flew up. And the night was already trembling from the rumble of airplanes. Now the rumble came from the right and from the left and from behind. The pilots were bombing the targets we had scouted. The retreat of the fascists was panic. Roads could not accommodate the flow of cars. Here they were crushed from the sky by Soviet pilots. Germans turned from broken, blocked by burning trucks roads into the forest, but even here they were met by partisans. Our task was to disorganize the German rear, to bring panic, to disrupt the evacuation, to prevent the occupants to take away the loot, to take our people as prisoners. Everyone who could move fought. Partisans kept under fire roads, destroyed bridges and crossings. The battle near the village of Slavkovichi was memorable. Here at the bridge blown up by our aviation, there was a big traffic jam. There was no one here, army men and Gestapo men, field gendarmerie, police officers and merchants, all rushing in terror, yelling, shooting at each other, trying to squeeze through to the remains of the bridge. We are lying 200 meters away from this maddened crowd. The squad leader says to us, "Look, boys, memorize. Here it is, the triumph of justice. Fire." The machine guns of Tarakovich, Basenko, Shpakovsky, Somov and other partisans took the floor. The motley bunch on the road scattered, crushing each other. The fascists rushed in different directions. Bullets caught up with them everywhere. Many ran to the swamp. The quicksand swallowed them without a trace. Seeing that there was no escape, hundreds of Germans and Polizei raised their hands. They asked for mercy from those who had never been spared before. We didn't shoot them. Let them live. Maybe someday they will become human beings. The first scouts of the advancing army met us not far from the village of Bobrovichi, in the same oak tract from where we had once led out the peasant families doomed to death. 8 slender soldiers were walking along the forest road, and sweaty gymnasts' orders and medals, and on their shoulders epaulets news to us. These 8 Soviet soldiers were for us the most dear people in the world. We hugged them, kissed them, squeezed them in our arms, and happy tears flowed down our cheeks. On June 24, under the red banners, we entered our district centre Glusk. The population that was hiding from the fascists poured out of the forest. On the wastelands and ashes left by their native villages, people were starting a new life. They knew that now they would not be disturbed by anyone, neither the Gestapovs, nor the Polizei, nor the headman, nor any other scum. Once and for all, the fascist filth had been swept out of the liberated land. It was time to part with the people with whom I had become close during this difficult year. At my request, the military enlistment office is sending me to the Black Sea Fleet. "Are you coming with me?" I asked Misha Dutchenko. A sailor blushes as if he's confessing something bad. "No. My friends persuaded me to go to the pontoon regiment. Interesting business. And you know it's much closer from here to Berlin than from the Black Sea." It's sad, of course, to part with a guy like that, but actually he's right. People are needed everywhere. My squad mates Vanya Tarakovich, Kostya Poplavsky, Boris Shokman, Sasha Gotkovsky are already dressed in their new army uniforms. Tomorrow they will go to the west with their unit. At the end of the station in Bobruisk, I was waiting to board the train when someone came up to me from behind and covered my eyes with his palms. Who was it? I called a dozen names. Then I say to the joke, "Buddy, let go. I can't guess anyway. I can't know the whole Soviet Union, or at least the whole Belarus." My hands unhooked. I turned around and was stunned. In front of me, in an officer's tunic with 3 stars on his epaulets, was Leonid Maximenko. It turns out that we fought side by side for a whole year. He was in Mikhailovsky's partisan brigade, and never met. Now Lenya was in his native element, cavalry. Their regiment will leave Bobruisk in an hour to pursue the retreating enemy. And again the Black Sea is splashing at my feet. In Novosibirsk, where temporarily settled the headquarters of the fleet, I meet unexpectedly Leonid Pavlovich Golovin. He is already a lieutenant colonel working in the headquarters. From his hands I receive a direction to the fleet crew. I was given a uniform. On the epaulets flannel, 3 gold stripes. I'm a petty officer of the first article again. I can't. The Black Sea sailors were preparing for new landing operations. Sailors of the unit to which I was appointed were also waiting to board ships. On August 22, we loaded in 2 Apson fast-landing barges. All night we were sailing in a stormy sea, soaked to the skin. And in the morning in the distance showed the outlines of the coast. Odessa, over there stood our battery. And there was Nuzanovka, Ilishevka. We were standing in soaked coats. But we were not cold. It was hot in our chests, and a tight lump came to our throats. The ships were getting farther and farther away. The front had already moved beyond our borders. Yet, when these lines are written, I am still serving in the Black Sea Fleet. I live in Sevastopol. It has become even more beautiful than before the war. My comrades on the armoured train live and work in the Crimea. Their fates have turned out differently. Leonid Pavlovich Golovin, after the armoured train, as I have already written, kept the defence on the north side, commanded a battalion of Marines. Then, in the summer of 1942, he fought with his battalion on the Yalta Highway. Here he was seriously wounded. An enemy mine exploded at his feet. Shrapnel burrowed into his legs, arms and stomach. It was in the very last days of the defence. Miraculously, he managed to evacuate to the big land. He spent almost a year and a half in hospitals, underwent several operations, and at the end of 1943, still with open wounds, he returned to. He prepared cadres of junior command staff, taught at the school, served in the Northern Fleet. In 1957, he retired with the rank of colonel. Now Leonid Pavlovich is actively involved in the promotion of military traditions. He is a member of the Military Scientific Society, a member of the board of the Museum of the Red Banner Black Sea Fleet. Vasily Andreevich Golovenko, the former assistant commander of the armoured train on the railway part, aka the Partorg, after he was seriously wounded on June 26, 1942 at the Trinity Tunnel, was safely delivered by boat to Bolshaya Zemlya. 29 shrapnel wounds Vasily Andreevich received then. He underwent 4 operations and still carries several shrapnel fragments in his body. After treatment in hospitals, he was again at the front as an assistant battery commander, participated in battles since 1960, having retired from the reserve, works on duty at the depot of the Sevastopol Railroad Junction. Other members of the crew of Zheleznyakov lived up to the Happy Victory Day and live safely now. Drives trains on Crimean roads, former driver of armoured train Zhenya Matyosh. However, it is no longer Zhenya and Eugene Ignatievich, the honourable head of the family, a respected man at the Simferopol Railway Junction. His name is inscribed on the Board of Honour of the Pridniprovskaya Railroad. He was awarded the title of the best machinist. He lives in a modest house on the outskirts of the regional centre, together with his wife Anna Kondratyevna. This is the same Anya Shadovich, who in the days of Sevastopol defence showed fearlessness and courage, helped the front with everything she could. Eugene Ignatievich was in captivity, escaped and then joined one of the underground organisations of Simferopol. At Simferopol station works as a dispatcher, another driver of the armoured train, Mikhail Vladimirovich Galanin. He is also a hereditary railroader. Back in the 29th year, 18-year-old boy, he came to the locomotive stoker, then worked as an assistant driver. After serving active duty, he returned to the railroad, finished the course and became a driver. After the Troitsky-Nil, Mikhail Vladimirovich was taken prisoner, but he stayed in the camp only a few days. Working on repair of a railway track, he successfully escaped to Simferopol, for some time hid at acquaintances, and then got in touch with Crimean underground fighters, and on their assignment worked in a locomotive depot. His family evacuated at the beginning of the war to the Far East. After the liberation of the Crimea, returned safely to his homeland. In Evpatoria lives and works former commander of the armoured platform Boris Nikolaevich Koshetov. He is still on wheels, but now behind the wheel of a car. He is the driver of Evpatoria Taxicab Park. Fate cruelly dealt with Lavrenti Fasson, our accordionist and commander. Having been captured, he made an unsuccessful escape at the stage Kherson Nikolaev. He was detained and taken to Kherson prison. For 3 months he was kept in the punishment cell, a stone sack in which he could only stand bent over. Further camps in Belarusia, West Germany. In 1945 he was liberated by the Allies. His stay in fascist torture did not pass without a trace. 2 or 3 years later, Lavrenti Iosifovich's limbs began to die. His legs and arms were amputated. His first family was killed by bombing. He married a second time. His wife Lyubov Mefodievna is a good woman. She works in the state farm, brings up her son, and is very attentive to her husband. The local authorities of Lugansk city also take care of the veteran. They allocated him a 3-room apartment, made a chair for mobility. Young people do not forget Lavrenti Iosifovich. He receives letters from all parts of our vast homeland. And let I am without legs and without hands, writes the veteran, but I am given strength and courage, great mental care about me. Former machinist Alexander Andreevich Kovalinsky lives in Donbass. He already retired. Indefatigable chauffeur of a half-truck, Peter Goncharov does not part with a wheel of the automobile. Recently he came to me from Kazakhstan. A few years ago I had an opportunity to speak with memories of the combat deeds of the crew of the armoured train on Central TV. After that I started to receive letters from many people who watched the program. Needless to say, the most joyful, the most exciting were the letters from the Zhelezniakovs, whom we considered dead. Vasily Drobina, the former commander of the first gun on Lieutenant Botsenko's armoured platform, responded. Here is his letter. Watch the program. I saw our native armoured car, on which I had to fight from the first day to the end. I will never forget those days when we were blocked in the Troitsk tunnel, when the Germans pelted us with smoke bombs. I remember when you, playing the guitar, sang songs. One of them I remember well. It was called There Were Three of Them, a song about three destroyers that died heroically in an unequal battle with the enemy. Our comrades who laid down their heads for the motherland will never be forgotten. Boris Zorin, our commander Kravchenko, Commissar Porozov. What kind of people they were. I remember how hundreds of fascist planes were dive-bombing us, how our armoured platform with people was buried in the tunnel. I was wounded then. I was bandaged by our paramedic. I think his name was Sasha Nishev. On the last day during the break, I managed to leave the city together with the Lodovovka. We got to Pesoknaya Bay, then came to the 35th Battery, the last line of Sevastopol defence, then Cape Chernys, the edge of the Crimean land. For 5 days we hid in the rocks of Chersonesus, without food and water, until the Germans, hungry, exhausted, did not pick us up. I will not describe what I experienced in fascist captivity, but I had to fight, and I am happy that together with my friends I ended the war in Berlin, celebrated the victory in the very fascist lair. Now I work as a director of production and technical school in Nikolaev. I also received a letter from the Lok 1st Gun Vasily Tikhonovich Sazan. He, as well as some other Zhelezniakovцы, managed to get out to the big land in the last days of the defence. On June 27, during the battle in Kylan-Balka, he was concussed and woke up in Gelendzhik. After recovery, he fought at Tarak and Grozny, then liberated Kiev. Rivne participated in the battle at Sandomir Bridgehead. In January 1944, on the tank T-34 turret gunner, Vasily Surchan broke into the German city of Breslau on order. On his 30-checker, he reached Berlin, and on May 9, 1945, he liberated Prague. Here, on one of the squares, his tank was placed on a pedestal as a monument to the courage and valor of the Soviet soldiers' liberators. I read his letter and remembered. Once we were sitting with him in the evening near the tunnel, breathing fresh air and dreaming. It was in the last days of the defense of Sevastopol. The city was burning. The Germans were already on the north side. Some of their units had bypassed Korabelnaya, and we dreamed of the future, of victory, because we really believed in victory. Where would you like to end the war? Surjan asked. Of course, in Europe, I answered, being absolutely convinced that it would be so, and added, best of all on the Danube. After all, and I'm in Berlin, Cezanne said confidently, to see our victory with my own eyes. Yes, we believed in ourselves, in our army, in our people, and isn't it significant that our dreams came true? Both he and I went through 100 deaths, but we ended the war victorious and as we dreamed. He in Berlin, I on the Danube. Vasily Tikhonovich works as a foreman of a construction team in a collective farm in Lugansk region. And here is a letter from the railroader Vasily Antonovich Tereshchenko from Pyatyhatsky district in Dnipropetrovsk region. On that last fateful day in the Troitsky tunnel he was wounded, and he was poisoned by gases quite a lot before he had time to put on a gas mask. He was carried out of the tunnel by Dmitry Motsky. When Tereshchenko breathed fresh air, his mouth and nose bled. The terrible days of captivity began. In the column moving to Simferopol, Tereshchenko met with his commander, Lieutenant Koshetov. This meeting was not joyful. After a heavy contusion at the Trinity Tunnel, Koshetov barely kept on his feet, was thin and pale, stammered and severely experienced what had happened. In Nikolaev, in the central prisoner of war camp, Tereshchenko saw among the wardens his former colleague Sergenko. On the sleeve of his flannel shirt was a red armband with a Nazi swastika. He tried to recruit Vasily to the Hitlerites, but he received a strong rebuke. After that, fascist henchman did not give life to his former colleague. This further strengthened Vasily Tereshchenko's decision to flee. Once, while unloading coal at the railroad station, he stealthily penetrated to the spare branch, where there were extinguished steam locomotives, and climbed into the furnace of one of them. After pushing aside some grates, he went down into the underblower and put them back in their original places. With the help of elderly railroaders who worked at the station, he managed to leave Nikolaev the next day and get to his native village in Dnipropetrovsk region. After liberation, in the battles for the liberation of Kirovograd, he was seriously wounded and returned to peaceful labor. Now Vasily Antonovich works at the station Verkhovtsevo, receives a pension, raises 5 children. Yes, he writes, life goes its way. We are getting older. The temples are covered with grey hair, but still live well. And to those comrades who are destined to die for our children, for our eternal memory, I often dream to go and pass through those places where our armoured train made fearless voyages, to look at the mounds where our friends and comrades are buried, and to look at our armoured train to sit at the right wing of the helm of my favourite cannon. Mikhail Novitsky's brother Vladimir Novitsky sent a letter. He writes with bitterness that only now he learned that Mikhail fought as a hero and died a brave death. Until now it was only known from the official notification that he was missing in action. More than 10 years ago, his father died, never having learned the truth about his son. And quite unexpected, but joyful for me and all my Zheleznyakov friends, a letter from Lurchenko brothers, Zakhar and Stepan. After all, we all thought that they died on that fateful day, when our first armoured platform was destroyed, and it turned out ruined. We watched the programme, and in memory rose all the details of our combat life on the armoured train. You said that during the collapse of the armoured platform among the dead were Lurchenko brothers. Yes, we remembered that collapse for the rest of our lives, but big eternal thanks to Vasily Andreyevich Golovenko and you, Nikolai Ivanovich, for pulling us half alive out of the casemate, and to paramedic Sasha Neshayev for bringing us to our senses. Some days we, together with Leonid Drozdov, also wounded, lay in the Aditin hospital, and then we were sent to Chersonesos for evacuation. There we met some comrades from the armoured train, including Brother Stepan, as well as Engineer Captain 3rd Rank Karkenko. 3 days we were in the rocks, waiting for ships, and on July 3 fascist machine gunners appeared over our heads. The most terrible thing began, Captivity. We had to go through a lot. It is difficult to write about it. The main thing, we survived. Now we work. We have children. But are Drozdov, Neshayev alive? Yes, I can't say anything about these comrades. If they're alive, maybe they'll respond. Now Zakhar Kondratyevich, the father of 2 sons, works as a shift foreman of the bread receiving point in Donetsk region. And here is what Ivan Myashin told in his letter. After a part of Zheleznyakhovites were sent to the city tunnel to reload ammunition, they never saw the armoured train again. On June 29, a few more Zheleznyakhovites came to them and told them that the Germans were trying to capture the entire crew of the armoured train. And on the 2nd or 3rd day they were told to go to the area of Cape Chersonese. On July 1, in a firefight, Myashin was wounded. He was bandaged by Vasily Drobina. There was already nothing to shoot. There was no water and food. On the morning of July 8, under the cover of a smoke screen, the fascists came to the very cliff, set up guns and machine guns and started shooting. Then there was barbed wire on the Kulikovo field. 4 days without food and water. At night, to quench thirst, they licked cold stones. Many prisoners in closed freight cars were taken to Kryvoy Rog to work in the mines. 6 months later, Myashin and other comrades escaped. 10 days later, they were already in the Black Forest in Kirovograd region. There they joined the partisan detachment for the motherland. In the area of Zmenka station, together with 15-year-old Misha Leonov, they derailed a German train. At the end of November, as a member of the group participated in the operation, in which a large military convoy was destroyed. And on December 12, the detachment went out to meet the advancing units of the Soviet army. Myashin was discharged and returned home, and there he was already considered missing. His father died near Kalinina. For some time, Ivan Alexandrovich worked in school. Then, having recovered after the wounding and captivity, was again drafted into the army, fought in Poland under Berlin, finished the war on Elba. After the war, he completed his higher education and now teaches history in his native village in the Tambov region. It is difficult to convey the joy, he writes, when I learned about our comrades who survived. And with sorrow I think that there are so few of us left. The news that the armoured train had recently been cut up hurt my heart. It seems that my battle friend comrade is gone. He would stand as a monument to all the living and the dead. Each of us would give a lot to visit its platforms, to walk through the casemates, to descend through the hatches, to press our lips to its cold but reliable armour. I want to visit Sevastopol, to stand on its land, stained with our blood, to bow to our friends who fell for this city, to meet with the living. Ivan Alexandrovich also said that his friend Yakov Baklan is still alive. He lives in the Nikolaev region. Sergeant Mikhail Kozakov responded, Boris Zorin's right hand, a dashing scout, as the newspaper Red Chernomorets wrote about him in the unforgettable days of Sevastopol defense. For many years, Zheleznyakhovsky considered him dead, and suddenly an unexpected joy. After the TV program, Mikhail Ivanovich wrote to me, and later he himself came. Many trials fell to the share of the fearless scout. Together with other Zheleznyakhovites, he was on the last line of defense. in the Cossack Bay. Before his eyes died a glorious machine gunner of the armoured train Jayikia. She fought to the last, then hid in the rocks above the seashore. Noticing ships in the distance, Mikhail, together with other Sevastopol residents, rushed to them in a swim. He was picked up and taken to Novorossiysk on a mine sweep. The war ended, and Kozakov returned to his native Lugansk. Here he lives and works at present. He often visits Lavrentiy. They remember Sevastopol armoured train comrades. Boris Ivanovich Varinik, our former gunner of the first gun, sent me a message from Shostka. He also survived the Chersonese epic, went through many trials, but survived. We received a letter from Alexei Filipov, a former soldier of the railroad company, which provided combat operations of our armoured train. Like many other railway fighters, in the last weeks of defence he was transferred to the 388th Rifle Division, fought in the area of Komory village. Together with the unit withdrew past Balaklava to the airfield, to the Cossack Bay. I saw how the 35th Battery gave the last volleys, how it was blown up. On July 4 everything was over. In November 1942 Filipov escaped from captivity in Donbass, and 2 months later he was again at the front. He finished the war in Austria. Now, like Myashin, works as a teacher. With bitterness Filipov reports about the death of many of his comrades. The commander of the railroad battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Goncharov, was tortured by the fascists in Simferopol prison. Commissar Shumilin, in the last minutes before capture, shot himself on the seashore. I knew them both. They were wonderful people. Grigory Hetman, with whom we defended Odessa and Sevastopol together, also wrote to me. Not only thanks to the TV program I found old friends. Life is an interesting thing. It gives a lot of surprises, sometimes the most unexpected. On December 22, 1963, together with the Navy journalist Marita, I was returning from Evpatoria from Boris Kochetov. We were travelling in a cab. One of the passengers was unusually excited, asking everything about Sevastopol, and suddenly he confessed sincerely. You see, I haven't been there for 22 years. I probably won't recognize it. I looked at him, and something familiar seemed to me in his enthusiastic, inquisitive face. What were you doing in Sevastopol then? I asked. I was working at the naval plant. At the naval plant. Do you remember the armoured train? Zheleznyakov. I built it. You built it? Yes, welding armour plates. I'm an electric welder. Wait. That's the kid who kept asking to join us on the armoured train? That's the one. And you? You're the commissar? All kinds of meetings, the most unexpected, happen in life. It was, of course, Nikolai Bondarenko. Now he works in Kerch. He was awarded 5 medals for his selfless labour during the Patriotic War. Well done, Kolya. Here is another unexpected but dear to me meeting. Once on Sunday, having changed from the watch, I was going home. The road passed by the Trinity Tunnel, although it is not the closest, but I always go this way. From the hill opens a unique panorama of Sevastopol and its surroundings. And in the gully, which spreads to the left of the tunnel, there are graves of our comrades, Zhelezniakovs, who died a heroic death. At this sacred place for me, I always stop for a break, to indulge in memories. My battle friends Zorin, Zarinatsky, Beremtsev, Matveyev, Pogrebnov, all those who did not live to see the victory, who now sleep eternal sleep in these graves, stand in my memory as alive. Here every bush and every stone is familiar to me, and when I happen to be away from this place for a long time, I feel that something is missing. I sat down on a stone and again, for the umpteenth time, indulged in memories. The events, people, their faces, smiles, everything floated in my memory as if it were real, as if I could see them in front of me and hear their voices. The horn of a locomotive brought me out of my oblivion, brought me back to reality. A fast Leningrad train was approaching the tunnel. I saw the last carriage disappearing into the tunnel, turned around to look at the dear places once again. And I saw a woman in a brown coat and a white hat near the grave. Next to her, a girl of about 14 was setting up a camera, apparently wanting to capture the grave. Something in me trembled, and I hurried over to them. A woman in her 40s was silently, pensively looking into the distance. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. I came closer and looked closely at her face. She too looked at me with an absent look, as if to say, "Why did you come here? Why are you disturbing me?" And then I recognized her. It was Olga Doronkina. "Olia, is it really you, our sister?" She looked at me. tensely remembering and couldn't recognize me. I'm Alexandrov, don't you remember? Kolya, she shouted, threw herself into my arms and gave vent to tears. We sat down at the headboard of the grave and Olya told me her story. After the commander of the armoured train Kharkiv sent her for evacuation, she still did not immediately obey the order. Her way lay past the station, behind which at the end of the South Bay was a military warehouse. There the girl began to help load and distribute to parts of the food. So were lost favourable days for evacuation. And when among thousands of other Sevastopol residents she arrived in Cossack Bay, it was almost impossible to evacuate. There were many wounded people on the shore, and the girl, having got medicines, organised a dressing station. The fascists continuously bombed and shelled this piece of land, but the soldiers held it and more than once went into counterattacks, holding back the onslaught of the advancing enemy. In those days, Olya met Boris Varanik in Cossack Bay. Only a few minutes of conversation. Boris said goodbye and with a group of fighters, with automatic rifles in front of him, ran to the front line. Then, among the wounded, she recognized another Zelezniakovtsi, Leonid Drog. He was all riddled with bullets and kept asking if he would live. The orderlies said that he had hit a fascist armoured car with an anti-tank gun. Then he finished it off with a grenade, but they still managed to pierce him with a machine gun burst. Olya was escorting the wounded to the ship, and when the pier suddenly collapsed, the crowd threw her back, and she caught the straps of the medical bags on some boxes. The straps squeezed her throat. She could neither scream nor free herself from them. Only two in the crowd, noticing the trouble, snuck up to her and cut the straps. They were the commander of the armoured train Kharkiv and the commandant Volodya Baranov. They also went to the last battle and did not come back. When the most terrible thing came, Captivity and all survivors were driven to the city. Next to Olya in the column was a woman with two small children. Olya took one of them in her arms. Already in the city, they both managed to get out of the column unnoticed and join the crowds. Then, with great difficulty, she reached home, in the Soksky district. It took a long time to recover from the horrors she had experienced. After the war, Olya graduated from pharmacy school, worked for many years in Crimean resorts, and recently moved to Sevastopol and works in one of the hospitals. For a long time we sat at the headboard of the grave, talked, remembered our dear and close friends and comrades, and when we left, 2 bunches of flowers were left on the grave. Many of my comrades live and work in the Crimea, the former cook and machine gunner of the armoured train Ivan Nikolaevich Pyatakov, Commodore Boris Yakovlevich Grishko, Stoker Ivanov. I was especially pleased to meet the son of Commissar Porozov. After all, I knew him, you can say, since those distant war years. And how did his fate turn out? In front of me are 3 exciting documents printed in the newspaper of the Aviation Technical School, where Leonid Porozov studied in 1942. The first document is a letter from Commissar Porozov to his son. Today is the 22-year anniversary of my membership in the party. On this day, our armoured train made many raids on the enemy, and all were successful. I believe that our people under the leadership of the party will defeat the enemy. I believe that after the victory, the Soviet people will live even better, and the motherland will become even more beautiful and powerful. For this, if necessary, it is not a pity to die. Learn, my son, the military business persistently, and when you get to the front, beat the enemy as we are beating now. If you chicken out cowardly, then you are not my son. The second document is a letter from the regimental Commissar Sannikov. Here it is to Cadet Porozov L.P. Your father, Regimental Commissar P.A. Porozov served as military commissar of the armoured train Zheleznyakov. Your father staunchly defended our sacred land and died a brave death in battle, defending Sevastopol. Let the image of your father be your banner in the fight against the vicious fascism. For his shed blood, for his death mercilessly avenged the fascist barbarians, vandals of the XX century. The third document is a letter from Cadet Leonid Porozov, an honor graduate. I recently learned about the death of my father, the commissar of the armoured train Zheleznyakov. He fought steadfastly until the last days of the defence, died in an unequal struggle, but did not retreat. I am proud of my father and swear to be like him, brave and merciless to enemies. Now, having finished my studies, I assure that I will honestly and selflessly defend my motherland. I will avenge the vile fascists for the death of my beloved father, for the death of many Soviet people who fell at the hands of fascist villains. My heart is full of a sense of revenge. And if I have to die, I will die for the motherland, not as a coward, but these letters stirred up all the cadets of the school. The whole company, in which was Leonid, filed reports with a request to send to the front near Volgograd. Only half of the requests were satisfied. Leonid Porozov, as an excellent student, was left in the school as an instructor. But a few months passed, and through General Samokhin, a friend of his father, Leonid managed to get sent to the front. He fought on the Leningrad front in the 7th Guards Air Assault Regiment. After a severe wound, he was again transferred to the school as an instructor. After the war, he received an officer's rank and now serves in the Far East. He is married and has 2 children, grandchildren of Commissar Porozov. I also meet people who were not in the crew of our armoured train, but took the most active part in its construction and combat activity. Antonina Alexeyevna Sarina, who led the city's industry in the days of defence and now in Sevastopol. She heads the Historical Commission at the City Party Committee and is doing great work to recreate the true history of the defence of the hero city. Lives in Simferopol, former head of the political department of the military exploitation department of the NKs, Alexander Elisevich Nemkov. Zhelezniakovites loved him very much for his great attention to the armoured train. Unfortunately, I.D. Kizev, the head of the military exploitation department, who also did a lot for the combat activity of Zheleznyakov, did not live to see the victory. Due to circumstances, he was captured on July 4, 1942, and was brutally tortured in a fascist concentration camp. The tragic fate also befell the head of the track distance, communist Mikhail Nikolaevich Velsky. Hitlerite shot him. The days of Leonid Petrovich Porozov's vacation flew by quickly. He visited everywhere where the ways of the Black Sea armoured train passed. Belbek Valley, Balaklava Branch, Mikenziev Mountains, Inkerman Heights, Kemishlovsky Bridge. He was convinced once again and again that his father, Regimental Commissar Pyotr Agafonovich Porozov, fought bravely and courageously and died as a true communist. He listened and listened with avidity to my stories, and as if he saw before him the Sevastopol land of the days of defence, blistered by bursting shells, saw hundreds of soldiers of the armoured train and among them one, the most dear beloved, with whom he never had the chance to meet, and it seemed to me that he recognized his father anew, in a different way, as a soldier recognizes a soldier. On the last day we said goodbye on the platform of Sevastopol railway station. We approached and, without conspiring, stopped at 3 tall poplars. "These?" Leonid Petrovich asked. "Yes, these," I answered, and we silently took off our caps. Once our armoured train stood near these poplars, and when enemy airplanes bombed us, these trees were bombed too. But now they're growing and have risen to the sky even more, because life is invincible. A group of young men and women passed by, laughing and talking animatedly. Tanned, weathered, cheerful. They must be students. Oh, weren't they the same ones who had recently unwittingly witnessed our meeting with Leonid Petrovich? That's right. That restless girl with cornflower eyes is unrecognizable, chattering away. And next to her is the boy with the fuzz on his lip. He's grown up. He's so important. It's only been a month. Hey, guys. Hello, young tribe. The students passed by, but suddenly looked back and stopped. They recognized them. The mischievous voices were silenced and their faces became serious. They approached the 3 poplars. Those who had a cap on their heads took it off. They're standing in deep thought. They realized that it was not just a meeting with veteran trees, but a meeting with their youth, a tribute to the heroic land that had nurtured these trees. And it became so easy on the heart, and the tears that had appeared in the eyes disappeared, and pride embraced the soul for these wonderful guys who have to go forward and forward along the path laid by their fathers. Somewhere in the distance, a loud gushing horn of a steam locomotive sounded, exactly like the horn of the Sevastopol armoured train Anatoly Zheleznyakov,